Hello again, true crime fans. We've got another mysterious case to explore. The case of Carly McBride. Carly McBride was born on April 14, 1983, to Steve McBride and Lorraine. As a child, she was cheerful and outgoing, sharing a close bond with her parents. However, as an adult, Carly began to experience many difficulties, which led to her abusing alcohol and drugs. Despite these challenges, she worked hard to overcome her addictions. By 2014, Carly was 31 years old and living in Belmont, New South Wales, Australia. She was a mother to 2 children, William, who was 7, and Cadence, who was 3. The children's fathers were different men. It is known that Andrew Easton, the father of Cadence, was one of the last people to see Carly. In 2013, Carly entered a rehab center to get rid of her addiction. During her time there, she met Sale Kenneth Newson, and their friendship gradually developed into a deeper relationship. Starting in August 2014, Carly and Sale spent nearly all their time together. Although they occasionally had arguments, they appeared happy overall. On September 30, 2014, Sale took Carly to Musselburgh to visit her 3-year-old daughter, Cadence, who lived with her father, Andrew Easton. Carly visited Cadence for a few hours, entering Andrew's house around 12:30 p.m. Sale did not stay with her, but they agreed that he would return in a few hours. However, when Sale arrived to pick up Carly, she was missing. Carly's ex-husband, Andrew, mentioned they had a fight, which led Carly to leave. She intended to walk to the nearest McDonald's, about a 20-minute walk from Andrew's house. Sale, confused as to why Carly hadn't called to inform him of her whereabouts, he began trying to reach her by phone. After several unsuccessful attempts, he decided to drive to McDonald's, hoping to find her there. During the drive, he looked around in case Carly was waiting somewhere along the way. He thought it was possible her phone had died, but Carly was not at McDonald's or anywhere nearby. Sale drove around the streets of Musselburgh for a while, but he couldn't find Carly. When she didn't come home to Belmont that evening, he contacted the police. The detectives asked him to describe what had happened. Sale explained that he would drop Carly off, and she would walk to the front door with her daughter, turn around, and wave goodbye. He mentioned that she would usually call him twice and send him 2 texts during each visit to let him know she was okay. However, he noted that on that day, he dropped her off around 12:30 p.m., and everything felt different. He did not hear from her again at all. He texted and called her, but the phone kept ringing, and she didn't answer it. Sale arrived at Carly's ex-husband, Andrew's house around 4:30 p.m., as he usually did, to pick up she. However, Andrew told him that she had left after an argument at around 2 p.m. and walked toward a McDonald's about a mile away. This raised an important question: did Carly really leave Andrew's house, or was he withholding information? Andrew claimed to be the last person to see her, but there were no other witnesses to confirm that Carly left. The police spoke with neighbors and others along the route she might have taken to McDonald's, but since no one saw her, suspicion about Andrew increases. There are no surveillance cameras near Andrew's house that could verify his statement about Carly leaving at around 2 p.m. Investigators also reviewed footage from surveillance cameras at McDonald's but found no evidence that she had been there. The police conducted searches in fields behind a nearby residential area for clues, but the chief investigator stated that nothing lead had been discovered. The investigation will continue, and the police are asking anyone with information about Carly McBride's disappearance to come forward. She was last seen in blue jeans, sandals, and a yellow t-shirt, carrying a tan handbag. After getting a search warrant, the police searched the house Andrew, where Carly was last seen. A team of officers hoped to find clues about the disappearance of she. However, their search of Andrew's house revealed no new evidence. There was no sign that anyone had committed a crime in that house. Despite this, investigators found something concerning. Carly's Facebook account was deleted just hours after she went missing, before an official report was filed. This deletion sparked many questions. Are Carly's account deletion and her disappearance related? Did she delete her account herself, or did someone else do it? What was the reason for the account deletion? The Facebook messages might hold clues about what happened, which could explain why the account was removed. To find answers, detectives reached out to the U.S. Department of Justice, seeking assistance to recover Carly's account and identify who deleted it. Although Facebook data analysis is conducted at their headquarters in Menlo Park, California, Sergeant Wright mentioned that Carly's Facebook friends could also provide useful information. The New South Wales police are asking if anyone had contact with Carly on Facebook or other social media platforms in the days before her disappearance. They are looking for anyone who noticed something unusual and are encouraging them to come forward with information. Carly's parents doubted that she simply ran away to start a new life. Her close friend and roommate, Kylie Smith, mentioned that everything seemed normal when she spoke with Carly on the phone while on her way to Musselbrook. Kylie described Carly as very relatable and a free spirit. She was easygoing and loved life. She was always supportive of her friends. If someone was having a tough day, she could sense it and reach out. Kylie said that, every day they wake up not knowing what happened or where Carly is. Please, have some conscience and come forward with any information. They just need something to hold on to. The police conducted a comprehensive search of the area where Carly was last seen before she disappeared. This search involved search dogs, police divers checking the Hunter River and nearby locations, as well as aerial surveillance and patrols on trail bikes. Unfortunately, this did not lead to any clues as to Carly's whereabouts. As months went by, the investigation yielded no results. Carly left no traces after her disappearance. She did not turn on her phone, her social media accounts remained inactive, and she did not use any bank cards. Investigators started to fear that Carly may no longer be alive. 9 months after Carly went missing, her parents asked for help in locating their daughter. They were assisted by Detective Timothy Seymour, who could gather any information that might aid the investigation. Carly's mother, Lorraine, wept during the public appeal and begged for help to find her beloved daughter. She urged that if anyone knew anything, no matter how small, they should come forward and help family her. Detective Inspector Timothy Seymour stated that officers have been working hard since Carly went missing. He explained that they had a lot of information to review but were still asking for help. He also said that important information can come from a person, even if they think what they know is unimportant. As time passed, Carly's parents began to accept that they might never see their daughter alive again. Lorraine wrote a touching letter to the man who took her daughter from her. I believe everyone knows what happened to my girl or has seen the events of that tragic day. Please help us for her children. They are innocent and beautiful babies. Whoever you are, you have taken their mother away, their source of joy and happiness, their pillar of strength. Lorraine wrote a heartfelt letter to the man who kidnapped Carly. In her letter, she stressed that, no matter who he was, he had removed their mother from their lives, which took away their joy, happiness. They will never experience Carly gentle, warm kisses or her comforting hugs, or see her bright smile. Their cherished memories are gone, and they cannot say goodbye to her. Lorraine speaker that sorrow, anger, and frustration weighed heavily on them. After failing to find Andrew's involvement in Carly's disappearance, the police began investigating another suspect, Sale Newson. They discovered that Carly and Sale's relationship was troubled, primarily due to Sale's jealousy, which often led to arguments. Although they have only been together for a relatively short time, but Sale insists that he loves Carly very much, saying that she is the first woman he has truly loved in 14 years. He urgently sought information about Carly's disappearance, helped create a Facebook page, offered rewards, and approached people in the area where she was last seen. Despite publicly expressing his love for Carly, but Sale quickly began intimate relationships with other women. Just hours after reporting Carly missing, he propositioned several women for sex. Carly went missing on September 30th, but by October 2nd, and Sale was spending the night with another woman. Yet publicly, he portrayed himself as a heartbroken individual mourning the loss of his girlfriend. Detectives found out that Sale and Carly had a disagreement 2 days before she went missing. The argument was about Facebook messages that Carly received from other men. However, this information was only circumstantial evidence, and they needed more direct evidence to file any charges against Sale Newson. In April 2015, authorities conducted searches at 3 locations, 1 in Muswellbrook and 2 in Scone, a town in the Upper Hunter Shire of New South Wales, Australia. Scone is located approximately 15 miles from Muswellbrook. During these searches, police confiscated 3 firearms and a quantity of illegal substances, leading to the arrest of a 24-year-old man named James Anthony Canine. Although the police stated that these charges were not connected to the ongoing investigation into Carly's disappearance, they surfaced during the investigation. Therefore, it's important to remember this name. Almost 2 years had passed since Carly was last seen alive, and the police were still investigating her case without any new leads. However, on August 7, 2016, there was a lead new. In a rural area near Scone, 2 local pedestrians discovered remains in a shallow grave just a few feet off the road. Forensic analysis confirmed that these remains belonged to Carly McBride, a mother of 2 from Belmont who had disappeared on September 30, 2014, in Muswellbrook. Police delayed announcing the discovery of her body for 4 days in the hope of gathering more evidence. Superintendent Guyana emphasized that the police do not think Carly, 31, was taken from the street by a stranger. He stated that this was not a random act, and they were investigating her past and reaching out to as many people as possible. He refrained from naming any suspects, noting that the investigation was still in its early stages. Superintendent Guyana said that they have worked hard on this case over the past 2 years and the team is eager to find answers for Carly's family, added that they still have a lot of new information to process, and the case is still making good progress. Carly's parents have been desperately searching for information about their daughter's case. Lorraine has asked anyone who knows anything to come forward, as they want to find out who is responsible for her death. Finding Carly's body has given them some sense of closure. They are very grateful for the support from law enforcement and the community throughout the search. After 10 months of diligent investigation, a warrant was issued for Sale Newson's arrest on June 19, 2017. He has since been arrested and is in custody, but he denies any involvement in Carly's death. However, Sale was not the only person facing charges. Police suspect that 26-year-old James assisted Sale in disposing of Carly's body. Sale and James met at a rehabilitation center for individuals struggling with alcohol and substance abuse. Although they left the center at different times and for different reasons, they maintained contact afterward. Sale Newson's trial started in August 2018 and extended over several years due to the police only having circumstantial evidence. Prosecutors claimed that Sale met Carly after she left Andrew's house, attacked her in a fit of jealousy, and then disposed of her body. Forensic experts concluded that Carly died from multiple blunt force trauma, which included 23 skull fractures, 13 torso fractures, and injuries to her spine and ribs. The judge pointed out that Sale had claimed to the police that he was an experienced mixed martial arts fighter, boasting that he had had 20 fights and had won them all, and that he had trained with world champions. The judge determined that the cause of death was severe brain trauma resulting from significant force applied to Carly's head, concluding that he was convinced Sale had caused her death using his fists, feet, or potentially both, as well as objects. During their search of Sale's house, police discovered a map inside a shoebox under the bed. The map featured a circle drawn around the towns of Musselbrook and Scone, with Carly's remains located precisely within that area. Additionally, the map displayed the numbers 1, 2, and 3, which pointed to locations outside Musselbrook. Senior Constable Mohini confirmed that the first two numbers indicated the positions of cameras. After police discovered Carly's remains in 2016, Sale called her father, Steve. In their conversation, he revealed that the skeleton found was missing hand bones, a detail that the police had not shared with the public. Only a small group, Carly's parents, the police, and the Department of Forensic Medicine at John Hunter Hospital, were aware of this information. Authorities suspected that Sale was aware of this detail because he had intimate knowledge of the crime scene and was responsible for leaving Carly's body there, which was discovered 2 years later. Additionally, the clothes found on Carly's remains were the same as those she wore when she disappeared, indicating that she likely died soon after leaving Andrew's house. The police were unable to locate her purse and phone. When they examined Sale's mobile phone, they found that he had deleted Google location data for the period between September 18 and October 2, 2014. During the trial, investigators discovered that a photo of Carly, taken by Sale while he was traveling to Musselbrook, had been edited and cropped before the police were notified of her disappearance. When the search for Carly started, Sale promised a $20,000 reward for information about her location, but his bank account indicated he was broke. This suggested that he made the offer knowing that no one would find her, so he wouldn't have to actually pay the reward. From the beginning, Sale also tried to involve himself in the police investigation to shift suspicion away from himself onto others. While police and emergency services were gathering information, Sale also searched the surrounding streets for security camera footage or witnesses. However, the police stated that this search Sales was not meant to gather information, but rather to cover up details and see if anyone had witnessed him met with Carly. As volunteers and police organized their search around Musselbrook and distributed Carly flyers, Sale was in Sydney texting friends about driving an Audi R8. He claimed to be very familiar with the area where Carly was discovered and even described it to her father, Steve, despite only having seen footage of a staged crime scene set up by the police. The images show a staged crime scene created by the police to observe Sale's reaction. As investigators conducted interviews, reviewed his Facebook messages, and listened to his phone calls, they found more evidence against him. They discovered that Sale had searched online for how to delete a Facebook account. Although his account remained active, Carly's account was deleted shortly afterward. Although the initial evidence was circumstantial, but the prosecutor noted that when the clues were put together, they started to form a clearer picture of the case. Ultimately, these pieces of evidence built a strong case that eliminated other explanations for Carly's disappearance and the discovery of her body, which was about 82 feet from the roadside. The judge determined that the motive behind the violent and impulsive attack on Carly was jealousy stemming from annoyance. After picking Carly up from Musselbrook, he learned that she had spent around 90 minutes with Andrew instead of with her daughter, as they had intended. Carly's daughter was not at home during that time, and the fact that Carly was alone with Andrew for an hour and a half led Sale to attack her in a fit of jealousy. Carly's mother, Lorraine, said at the sentencing hearing that she had spent the past 2 years filled with sadness and anxiety. She longed for her daughter, who was always full of life and loved to return home to her 2 young children. Unfortunately, she said that the next time she saw Carly was in the morgue, a day she described as the worst day of her life. Lorraine mentioned that Carly should be living her life with her children, her sister, her father, and her. She added that after that day, she never wanted to hear, speak, or see the man who took her beautiful daughter's life again, and that she refused to think about him anymore. Lorraine stated that she would miss Carly every second of every day for the rest of her life. Nearly 7 years after reporting Carly missing, 43-year-old Sale Newson was found guilty in December 2021. He received a sentence of 27 years in prison, with the possibility of parole in 2038. After the sentencing, Sale addressed the judge to reaffirm his innocence. Sale said that he understood the verdict had been issued. He addressed the judge, asserting that he was innocent, and from the day he reported Carly missing up to that moment, he had fully cooperated with the police, the courts, and the jails. He had been convicted of a crime he did not commit and that someone else was responsible for the crime, not him. Sale also said he now faces a huge challenge in proving his innocence in court. James, who assisted Sale in disposing of Carly's body, claimed he was not guilty. However, in July 2022, a jury convicted him. The judge stated that James had lied to police during 3 interrogations to provide a false alibi for Sale, and had deleted data from his phone to hide his actions. At the time he was charged in the Carly case, James was already incarcerated for illegal possession of weapons and prohibited substances. In November 2022, 31-year-old James Anthony Canine had little reaction when he was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison, followed by a 4-year parole period. After the trial, Carly's parents expressed that although justice was served, the verdict would never bring their daughter back. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Courtney Holden. Courtney Holden was born on February 28, 1992. When she was 2 years old, she was sent to an orphanage. Life there was not happy, not only for Courtney but for all the other children. Every day at the orphanage began with a prayer. Children of all ages prayed to the Almighty to give them a family and a happy life. Finally, Courtney's dream came true when she was adopted by the Holden family. Courtney arrived in Spokane at the age of 4 and began living in the Holden family home with Joshua and some other foster children. However, instead of finding a loving family as she had hoped, her life here was worse than at the orphanage. What Courtney experienced at the Holden home could only be described as a real nightmare. From a young age, she was forced to do all the housework. She had to clean the whole house and wash the dishes after every meal for the entire family. If she made a mistake, she was punished. Surprisingly, the Holden family treated the other foster children better. No one understood why they disliked her so much. Judy Holden was old when she adopted Courtney, and she was the last child they had received from the orphanage. Perhaps this explains their inexplicable cruelty and hatred towards Courtney. She was forbidden to go out without permission and was often abused. Visitors to the house often heard Judy and Joshua calling Courtney Cinderella, as if she were in a fairy tale, but in reality, she was more like a slave to her cruel stepmother and siblings. Courtney was very sensitive and had become accustomed to a difficult life with the Holden family. She feared her foster mother and felt terrified just seeing her brother Joshua. He did not allow her to communicate with her friends. She was not allowed to use a cell phone or other modern devices. She was only allowed to leave the house when necessary and always had to ask for permission. She only enjoyed fresh air and chatted with her neighbors when she was alone in the backyard. However, she became accustomed to this life and did not feel bitter. She still respected her adoptive parents because they were the only family she knew, and she had no concept of a normal family. Courtney experienced a period of freedom when Joshua, due to conflicts with their parents, moved in with his sister for an extended time. For Courtney, this was the happiest period of her life. She finally experienced the freedom she had always longed for, allowing her to go out, walk around, and meet friends. After finishing school, Courtney fell in love for the first time. Michael was an ideal partner. She felt the care and attention from him that she had never received from anyone else. Every time she met Michael, Courtney felt extremely happy. Their relationship lasted until 2011, when they had a son. Michael was eager for Courtney to move in with him to create a complete family. However, for unknown reasons, Courtney refused this offer. She continued to live in a Holden household, which she did not like, and ended her relationship with Michael. After the Holden family went through many changes, their home became deserted. The adopted children grew up and left, and John Holden, Courtney's adoptive father, was passed away. For a while, Courtney lived with her adoptive mother, Judy, and sometimes her son Joshua was allowed to visit with Judy's permission. Their life was quite peaceful when Joshua, Courtney's brother, was away. However, after their father died in 2014, Joshua returned and began causing trouble for the family. He installed many surveillance cameras around the house on Hero Avenue, near Rogers High School in northeast Spokane. Signs that said, "Smile, you're being watched," were placed all over the yard, with cameras pointing in many directions. This made Courtney nervous because she knew that going out would get her in trouble with Joshua. Courtney's life once again became difficult and uncertain. Around 2015, Courtney revealed to a neighbor that she was again deprived of her right to use a cell phone, manage her social media accounts, communicate with people outside the family, drive, or leave the house without Joshua's permission. After Courtney gave birth, Joshua became so bitter that he forced her to cut off all contact with the baby's father. Courtney silently complied. The neighbor noticed bruises on Courtney's face and arms. When asked, she frankly admitted that Joshua hit her. They were worried and did not understand why Courtney would endure such abuse. They tried to help her by reporting it to the police, but the Holden family always tried to suppress the matter. This was partly because Courtney never publicly admitted that she was being threatened by her brother. Eventually, Courtney was forbidden to talk to neighbors and was only allowed to go out at night. She silently complied. Courtney knew Joshua better than anyone. He was a large, overweight man with considerable strength and was often abusive. Friends of Joshua described him as paranoid, ruthless, and unpredictable. He had bragged in public about his ability to easily end a life and dispose of a body without difficulty. He had a notable criminal record. In 2005, he was charged with assault and harassment, but due to lack of evidence and the victim's unwillingness to cooperate with the police, he was released. He was also suspected of assaulting and sexually abusing a woman in 2003 when the perpetrator could not be identified. In 2006, Joshua was arrested for domestic violence against his mother and burglary. These incidents forced him to flee his parents' home for several years. After returning, Joshua became more violent. He kept complete control over Courtney. She largely cut off contact with her friends, saying she was afraid to go out for fear that Joshua would find out and make things worse. A friend kept in touch with Courtney every day on Facebook until Joshua found out. In her last message, nearly 2 years ago, Courtney said, "I have to go. Joshua is coming home soon." After that, her account has since been permanently deleted. Those who know the Holdens say the family's relationship is unusual. They are surprised that Courtney's child calls Judy mom and Joshua dad, while only calling his biological mother by her first name. This has led some to suspect that Joshua may be the child's biological father. Neighbors and acquaintances have criticized the Holdens' odd lifestyle and antisocial behavior, and have tried to stay away from the house. In August 2018, after an argument, Courtney tried to leave the house with a suitcase of belongings. Her mother, Judy, yelled at her to go home, but Courtney refused. Joshua forcibly took Courtney back into the house. Judy closed the door, and Courtney was unable to escape. This was the last time the neighbors, and perhaps anyone outside the family, saw Courtney. After that, she lived a life of isolation from the outside world. It took nearly 2 years for people to start worrying about her disappearance. In October 2019, Michael expressed concern about not seeing her for nearly 2 years. He wanted to see the child, so he reported Courtney missing to the police on October 24th. The police went to search Holden's house and were surprised to find Courtney was not there. Joshua and Judy refused to cooperate. Judy only allowed the police to look through Courtney's room and then told them to leave. A search dog was used but found nothing. The Holdens claimed that Courtney had abandoned her child and run away. However, they could not explain who was withdrawing Courtney's Social Security benefits and using her electronic food stamps. On the day the police searched the house, Judy and Joshua withdrew the remaining $600 from Courtney's bank account. The next day, a woman claiming to be Courtney called the National Crime Information Center, saying she was safe and did not want to be searched. Police traced the call and found that the woman was Courtney's half-sister. Joshua and Judy later gave conflicting explanations for Courtney's disappearance. They said she ran away with a truck driver and then with a secret lover. Courtney's absence, along with the changing accounts of those who lived with her, made it clear that the Holdens were hiding something. In late October 2019, Joshua and Judy Holden abruptly left Spokane, leading detectives to suspect they were involved in Courtney's disappearance. They were found in Texas, at the home of one of Judy's adopted daughters. Authorities were able to charge them with withholding Courtney's welfare and identity theft, leading to their arrest in Texas. In early October, the Spokane Police Department wanted to check on Courtney's status. The case quickly became a missing persons investigation, which was assigned to Major Crimes Detective Randy Lesser. Courtney was officially declared missing. Alerts were sent to all states, and the media picked up the story, triggering a widespread search. When police and detectives went to check on her home, Joshua and Judy Holden have continued to refuse to cooperate with the investigation. Beside that, Randy told the vet he was worried Courtney might be dead and mentioned he was particularly concerned about Joshua's history of violence. Joshua had been charged with assault in the past, but the case was dismissed when the victim stopped cooperating with prosecutors. Investigators are now gathering DNA evidence and court records from that case, which show Joshua was also suspected in another attack in 2003. Neighbors and family described Joshua as mentally unstable, cruel, and diagnosed with paranoid schizophrenia. One neighbor revealed that Joshua was unemployed and that Judy feared him. The neighbor said Joshua and Judy often bragged about how they had eluded the police. Joshua also claimed that killing and hiding a body was easy. Especially when you have kids, you can't just disappear, said Detective Randy. Courtney was also described in court records as a devoted mother who never abandoned her children. For more than 18 months, Courtney was confined to her home and was not allowed to leave. Joshua and Judy gave neighbors and relatives various excuses for her absence, from traveling with her truck driver boyfriend to running away with her fiancé. At one point, they said she was home but not available to receive visitors. When Randy visited their home in early October, Judy claimed that Courtney had just returned home a few days earlier and was taking a walk with her son. However, when asked for her phone number, Judy slammed the door. The police then forced her to let them in to check Courtney's room. According to Randy, Judy appeared very nervous about the situation. According to Randy's court records, the house was extremely messy with items piled everywhere, including on the kitchen counter. Courtney's room was also in disarray, with an empty mattress. Randy commented that it appeared that no one lived there. At one point, Judy panicked. When Randy asked to check the rest of the house for Courtney's child, Judy ordered the investigators to leave. Later that day, a neighbor informed Randy that they had seen Joshua, Judy, and one of Courtney's sisters leave in a truck, along with a child. Detective Randy also became suspicious that Courtney, who suffered from a chronic illness, had not seen a doctor since October 2017. She received her last prescription in July 2017, although she had been taking her medication for months before she disappeared. Despite gaps in her medical records, money continued to be withdrawn from Courtney's bank account each month, and her EBT card was used to purchase groceries. Surveillance footage confirmed Joshua and Judy shopping with a small child. They was also caught on camera withdrawing the remaining money from Courtney's bank account on the day she was declared missing in early October. On October 24th, Joshua and Judy left the home. When police arrived to execute a search warrant, Randy noted that they discovered the DVR from the security camera system had been removed, and the family's 6 pets were also missing. By mid-November, Joshua and Judy's cell phone numbers had been canceled. However, that same day, 2 new phone numbers with Texas area codes were activated on their accounts. About a month after the Holdens moved out, a neighbor called the police to report activity at the house. It was actually one of Judy's daughters and her husband, who had flown in from Texas to check on the property. They said they hadn't seen Courtney in 2 years and that Judy was retired. However, there were inconsistencies in their information. The man told the police that Joshua and Judy had a child, while Judy's daughter insisted that the child was Courtney's. In mid-December, Randy traveled to Texas to look for Joshua and Judy. Police found them at Judy's daughter's house, along with Courtney's son. Joshua and Judy Holden were arrested on multiple charges: identity theft, interference with child custody, unauthorized use of Courtney's bank account, and concealment of her child. The child was found safe and returned to his father. No other family members have been charged with any crime. Police searched Judy's home in Spokane with a search dog but found no trace of Courtney. A search of a home in Texas also turned up nothing. Police also searched a car and trailer belonging to Judy at an RV park in Oklahoma. Joshua, 40, and Judy, 74, are currently in custody in Texas and have refused to answer police questions. They also refused to be extradited to Spokane. With insufficient evidence to prove their involvement in Courtney's disappearance, it is likely that Joshua and Judy will be released. This is perhaps one of the most mysterious disappearances ever. I have 4 notebooks full of different information, Randy said of the month-long investigation. Judy and Joshua continue to maintain that they had nothing to do with Courtney's disappearance, while police believe she is likely dead but have unfortunately not been able to prove it. Domestic violence experts point to a number of factors as to why cases like Courtney's are not always reported. One is the societal assumption that someone else will take care of it. According to Morgan Kern, Director of Counseling and Outreach at the YWCA, fear of retaliation can also be a factor. And people sometimes view it as a family issue, something to be dealt with at home. Although Judy and Joshua have been accused of multiple acts, they have not been charged directly in Courtney's disappearance. However, many still suspect they knew what happened. Joshua not only had a history of aggression but had also claimed to be capable of killing and hiding a body from the police. Investigators believe Courtney is dead, but no suspects have been arrested in the case. To summarize today's story, it is sad that Courtney was victimized by the Holden family. This young woman longed for a loving family but did not have the courage to defend herself. She believed that the people who abused and exploited her were still family. But does a real family need to make you defend yourself like that? Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Jordan Worth. Alex Skeel was born on August 17, 1995 in Kingston upon Hull, into a warm and wealthy family. Alex Skeel also has a twin brother. The twins' health was not good when they were young because they were born prematurely. Despite these health challenges, Alex's intellectual development was not affected, and he was just like his peers. He was even able to actively participate in school sports. From a young age, his parents showered both sons with love and care, investing heavily in their education to give them a better life. After completing high school, both brothers enrolled at the prestigious Bedford College, where they continued their studies. Alex is smart, physically attractive and healthy thanks to his regular visits to the gym. He is quite shy, so he is hesitant to ask women out. In college, Alex met Jordan Worth, a young woman from a wealthy family. Jordan was very popular at college because of her fashion sense. At that time, many boys wanted to compete for her attention. Jordan also spends time volunteering, focusing on fundraising, organizing aid for local animal shelters and helping children in Africa facing famine. Her charitable efforts are contributions to a better world. Alex's skill fell for Jordan immediately, drawn to her kindness, intelligence, and beauty. Although he thought someone so famous and talented would never notice him, Alex was surprised when Jordan took the initiative to get to know him. They began dating in 2012, when they were both 17. Jordan and Alex, they were called the cutest couple in college. The early stages of their relationship were filled with love, respect, and care for each other. They often showered each other with sweet gestures and exchanged gifts on important milestones. They were often seen smiling and hugging in photos, accompanied by heartfelt messages and declarations of love. To those around them, it seemed like they were destined to be together and begin their journey of lifelong happiness. Jordan and Alex quickly decided to move in together. As students, they relied heavily on the financial support of their parents, who accepted the couple's relationship. Alex's parents even liked Jordan, considering her a responsible and serious girl. Jordan planned to become a history teacher. She had a very good impression on those around her. However, over time, Jordan's behavior began to change. She became more and more controlling of Alex, and the situation got worse. Alex felt pressured to report her every move to Jordan. Jordan checked his personal correspondence, including his phone, emails, and social media, without hesitation. She often exploded in fits of jealousy, but Alex, being in love, tried to ignore this behavior. When Jordan began to choose his clothes, forcing him to wear only what she picked. Over time, Jordan continues to limit Alex's social life. She decides who he can and cannot spend time with, and when, ultimately controlling who he meets. As Alex's relationship with Jordan continued, connections with those around him began to break down. His family and childhood friends were cut off from him, but he seemed oblivious to the situation. Despite their seemingly perfect public image, Jordan was controlling Alex's interactions, deleting his phone contacts without his knowledge and blocking his loved ones. She also responded to messages on his behalf, often being rude and insulting. Jordan would delete chat histories, leaving Alex unaware of what he had said to others. As a result, people began to distance themselves from him. Alex's twin brother noticed that Jordan was preventing them from communicating with Alex. At the same time, their parents also noticed changes in Alex's behavior, causing them to become concerned. Alex began to pull away from his family and those close to him. He stopped visiting, even on holidays. When his mother tried to reach out, she was met with rudeness. On the rare occasions she managed to speak with him, she urged Alex to end his relationship, warning that it would not end well. However, Alex refused to listen and defended Jordan, insisting she cared for him and meant no harm. The family soon discovered that Alex's girlfriend was behaving in a controlling manner. Jordan had convinced him to drop out of college, quit sports, and get a job. She then controlled his income, spending it on herself and entertainment. Concerned about Alex, his parents tried to intervene and convince Alex to leave Jordan, but he refused to listen to their concerns. In 2013, during Jordan's 18th birthday celebration at a country hotel, Jordan's behavior became alarming. As night fell and the guests began to leave, she disappeared without a word. Alex frantically searched for her, and the next morning Jordan stumbled back to their room, heavily intoxicated. When Alex asked where she had been, Jordan attacked him with aggressive actions and words. 2 months later, at Alex's 18th birthday party, Jordan got into a fight in front of his family and friends. Jordan assaulted a 15-year-old neighbor girl who was an acquaintance of Alex's family and had been invited to the party. Jordan saw the woman's intimate behavior with Alex, and Jordan became angry and attacked the girl by pulling her hair and scratching her face. Although Jordan eventually calmed down, the incident exposed her true nature to everyone present. Alex's parents and brother advised him to end the relationship because of Jordan's aggressive and unreasonable behavior. Alex took their advice for the first time and admitted that Jordan had overreacted. Alex spoke to Jordan that night, telling her that he had decided not to move back into their apartment and would instead live with his parents. After the breakup, Alex continued his studies and continued working, gradually losing contact with Jordan. On New Year's Eve 2014, Jordan surprised Alex by calling to tell her she was pregnant. Alex was surprised and delighted. Jordan apologized for not sharing the news sooner, fearing that he would no longer want to see her. When Alex's parents learned that they were expecting a grandchild, they invited Jordan to move in with them. Jordan accepted their offer and moved in with them. Jordan and Alex eventually got married, and 3 months later, they welcomed a son named William. The young family was initially filled with happiness and contentment. For a short time, Jordan tried her best to please Alex and rekindle the flame of their love. However, when William, their son, was 6 months old, Jordan became pregnant again. As the due date approached, Jordan became increasingly irritable and demanding, insisting that they move out of his parents' house immediately. Attributing her behavior to hormonal changes, Alex finally gave in and rented a place for them in the city. In the summer of 2015, Alex and his wife Jordan welcomed their second child, a daughter named Alice. Alex was overjoyed and felt grateful for his family. However, after the move, Jordan's behavior changed and her controlling nature resurfaced. She forbade Alex from communicating with his family and prevented his parents from seeing their grandchildren. Despite this, she continued to accept financial help from them and would occasionally even ask Alex to request money from his parents. Within a few months of marriage, Jordan psychologically manipulated and dominated her husband, stripping him of his autonomy and subjecting him to her complete control. She frequently belittled and insulted him, gradually escalating the abuse. The situation began when they were renovating their house, and Jordan became increasingly dissatisfied with Alex's efforts. One day, Jordan became angry after Alex expressed his frustration. In a fit of rage, Jordan threw a hammer at Alex's head, causing a deep gash. As Alex clutched his wound in shock and struggled to stay conscious, he begged Jordan for help or to call an ambulance. However, Jordan responded with indifference, telling him to crawl away and die. Jordan then left Alex without help, going into another room to watch television. The next 3 years of Alex's life were marked by non-stop moral and physical suffering. Despite this, his deep-seated depression numbed him to the escalating threats and abuse he faced. He continued working to provide for his family, but his frustration and discontent with his wife grew. Alex endured humiliation at home, being forced to sleep on the floor without a bed, blanket, or pillow, and no longer allowed access to the kitchen. He was forced to eat leftovers, often leaving him hungry, as Jordan controlled his finances, taking all his money, preventing him from buying anything outside the house. Jordan also disrupted Alex's sleep. Whenever Alex fell asleep, she would brutally attack him, hitting him on the head, cutting him, or pouring boiling water on him. As a result, Alex would wake up in excruciating pain, often bleeding or burned. He would then treat and bandage his wounds with whatever he could find, while Jordan calmly returned to bed. Over time, Alex grew numb to this abuse, eventually losing the will to resist. Alex is facing a brutal life, but neighbors and acquaintances believe the couple had a happy marriage. Jordan presented a perfect image on social media by posting old photos with captions expressing her love for her husband and how lucky she was to have found each other. However, the shocking reality is that she violently attacked Alex, knocked out his teeth and cut his arm with a knife, leaving deep wounds. Furthermore, Alex suffered severe burns and was unable to seek medical help, forced to treat his injuries with makeshift items such as plastic wrap and adhesive tape at home. The couple's neighbors frequently heard screams coming from the house, prompting some to call the police out of concern. However, whenever this happened, Jordan would convince the officers that everything was fine and they would leave. During a subsequent police visit, one of the officers noticed that the husband, Alex, had a fresh wound with blood running down his arm. He also appeared malnourished and had various bruises on his face. When Jordan tried to explain that her husband had mental health issues and sometimes harmed himself, the officer was unconvinced. Instead, they called paramedics, and Alex was taken to the hospital. The doctors were extremely worried about Alex's condition when he was admitted to the hospital. He was almost lifeless, and the severity of the injuries, especially on his arms, Alex's body was severely burned, with second- and third-degree burns covering significant areas. His physical condition was extremely weak. Further examination revealed that the ligaments in Alex's shoulder were severely damaged, possibly due to repeated beatings. There was also a deep gash on his forearm, and the doctor found that Alex had lost several teeth and had multiple hematomas. At that moment, Jordan rushed into the hospital, insisting on Alex being discharged and emphasizing that she was responsible for Alex's health. Although Jordan insisted that nothing unusual had happened and that these were self-inflicted injuries, her tone did not convince anyone. Therefore, it was decided that she would be taken to the police station for further questioning. Initially, Jordan denied any wrongdoing, maintaining Alex was self-harming. However, when Alex's parents arrived after visiting him in the hospital, Jordan's story changed. She began to describe in detail the abuse she inflicted on Alex, claiming she treated him like a dog and that he couldn't escape her. At the same time, Jordan alleged that Alex's supposed infidelity and deliberate provocation led to her violent behavior. She also stated that he was mentally ill and had a history of self-injury. Alex's parents refuted these claims, but Alex himself was initially hesitant to testify against his wife. It wasn't until after receiving medical treatment and counseling that Alex felt brave enough to share the horrific experiences he endured at home over the years. Jordan wasn't overly concerned about her upcoming trial, expecting at most an administrative penalty. However, after all the testimony was heard, the judge found 22-year-old Jordan Worth guilty of serious charges. These included deliberately causing severe bodily harm, both physical and emotional abuse, and controlling behavior. Jordan was sentenced to 7.5 years in prison. Not even her status as a mother of 2 young children reduced the severity of the sentence. The court's decision shocked Jordan. Jordan's children remained in the care of their father and grandparents while she served her sentence. After years of recovering from her trauma, Alex now devotes her time to helping others, especially victims of domestic violence. After serving 5 years of a 7.5-year sentence, Jordan is set to be paroled on July 4, 2023. As part of her parole, she is prohibited from contacting Alex Skeel and their children. Jordan has started a new life, is engaged to Adam Steph, and is expecting their child. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Johnny Aberry. Johnny Aberry was born on August 26, 1983 in the small town of Bristol, Tennessee, USA. She is cheerful, friendly, has many friends, and often goes to parties. While in school, Johnny was a member of the local cheerleading squad. After graduating from high school, she studied psychology and criminology at East Tennessee State University. While in college, she met Jason White. They became a couple, and they got engaged before graduating in late 2004. When Johnny was 21, she decided to continue her studies to get a master's degree in psychology, so she temporarily moved to Knoxville. While studying, she worked part-time at a child education center and realized her passion for helping children. Her boyfriend, Jason, studied law in another state. Despite the distance, they kept in touch and planned their wedding. While in Knoxville, Jania stayed at a classmate Jason Amami's apartment. They had attended college together and moved to Knoxville together. They shared a 2-bedroom apartment, and Jania stayed until she found her own place. Jania had 2 part-time jobs, one at a jewelry store and one at a children's hospital. On the evening of Sunday, December 5th, after working at the store, Jania went to the mall to do some Christmas shopping. When she got home, she wrapped presents for the children at the daycare center, chatted with her neighbors, and then went to her room. Before going to sleep, she talked to her boyfriend. Around 4 a.m., Jason Amami heard Jania screaming. He thought Jania was having a nightmare, so he went into her room, but instead of Jania, Jason Amami saw a stranger holding a knife. The stranger attacked Jason Amami, and they struggled. He eventually pushed the attacker away and ran out of the apartment. He went to the nearest convenience store, about a mile away, to call for help. The store clerk found him covered in blood and called 911. The police arrived at Jason Amami and Jania's apartment and found Jania in the hallway connecting 5 apartments. She was still alive but barely conscious. When asked about her attacker, she gave only vague clues. The police searched the entire building and the surrounding area but could not find the attacker. They took Jania to the nearest hospital, but despite the doctor's best efforts, she died. The doctor said that Jania had suffered more than 20 stab wounds and that her chances of survival were slim. Meanwhile, Jason Amami had suffered 8 injuries from the attacker, but only one was serious. He was treated and his life was not in danger. At the same time, detectives began investigating the scene. They found blood in the hallway, indicating that Jania had tried to call for help from neighbors, but no one answered the door. Near Jania's room, they found the murder weapon, a kitchen knife owned by Jason Amami. The attacker used the knife with such force that it was bent and damaged. Police also found blood stains near the back door and on the stairs leading to the street. Since Jason Amami and Jania had left through the front door, detectives believe the killer escaped through the back door. In Jason Amami's room, they found another clue, partial footprints that the attacker may have left while stalking and attacking Jason Amami. Because of the brutality of Jania's death, police suspected a personal motive behind the crime. Initially, detectives investigated Jania's boyfriend, even though he lived about 1,000 miles away in Knoxville. However, all of his friends and family said that Jania and her boyfriend had a wonderful relationship and that he had no reason to commit such a brutal act. He learned of Jania's death when her mother called at 10 a.m. to tell him. He said he fainted when he heard the news and it took him a long time to regain consciousness. Unable to do anything, he asked his neighbors to help him book a plane ticket and prepare his luggage. Investigators looked closely at Jason White's alibi and realized that he could not have made it to Knoxville and back in the morning by himself. So they eliminated him as a suspect and turned their attention to Jania's neighbor. This neighbor did not have a solid alibi and had been in the apartment with Jania, raising suspicions that he could be the culprit. Jania's friends and family also suspected this neighbor. Some believed that he could be the killer, while others accused him of fleeing the apartment, leaving Jania behind. The suspicions were so deep that the victim's parents did not even want him to attend her funeral. However, after Jason Amami was discharged from the hospital, investigators began questioning him. He stuck to his original story. He heard screaming, saw a strange man, and was attacked by him. After fighting off the attacker, Jason Amami ran to the front door and onto the street, seeking help from neighbors. He believed that Jania had also escaped from the apartment because he could not hear her screams. However, police had doubts about Jason Amami's story. What initially raised suspicions about Jason Amami were his injuries. 7 of the 8 were superficial, and the last wound to his right arm could have been self-defense or the result of an attack. Additionally, investigators found no signs of forced entry into the apartment, suggesting that the perpetrator may have been someone Johnny knew. Jason Amami claimed that he had taken out the trash through the back door that night but did not remember locking it. Detectives continued to press him, paying close attention to the door he used to exit the apartment onto the street. Jason Amami insisted that he had exited through the front door, but police suspected that he might be lying. If Jason Amami had indeed left through the front door, that would not have explained the presence of bloodstains near the back door, further raising suspicions against him. Police accused Jason Amami of using and selling illegal drugs, and of being aggressive when he could not satisfy his addiction. However, he denied all of these allegations. After hours of questioning at the police station, detectives suggested that Jason Amami take a polygraph test. Jason Amami agreed to take the test. The results showed that he gave false answers, which made detectives even more suspicious of him. However, detectives were still unable to charge him with murder due to a lack of concrete evidence. They had to wait for lab experts to complete testing on some of the evidence found in the apartment. They then discovered some key evidence, including 3 DNA samples on the murder knife, samples from Johnny, Jason Amami, and an unidentified man. The unidentified man's DNA was also found in Johnny's room, on the back door handle, and on the stairs the criminal used to escape to the street. They also found a fingerprint on the handle of the knife, but it did not match Jason Amami's fingerprint. These discoveries led the police to suspect that someone else had been in the apartment that night. However, when they ran the DNA sample against existing databases, they found no match. This complicated the case further, and detectives had to continue investigating to find the real killer. Investigators have ruled out Jason Amami as a suspect, but the public remains uncertain about his role in the incident. They believe that Jason Amami abandoned his friend and ran away instead of protecting her. However, it is worth noting that after the accident, Jason Amami began to suffer from post-traumatic stress disorder. A key finding was later revealed: the polygraph operator had misinterpreted the test results, and there was no indication that Jason Amami was lying. Additionally, there was no concrete evidence that Jason Amami was involved with illegal substances. They eventually concluded that this was used as leverage to frame him. More importantly, however, doctors initially underestimated the severity of Jason Amami's injuries. In fact, he had suffered severe damage to his lungs and neck, with little hope of a full recovery. Due to inaccurate information reported about Jason Amami's health, the insurance company only covered 25% of his medical expenses, leaving Jason Amami facing serious financial hardship. After eliminating Jason as a suspect, police began questioning him as a witness. Based on Jason's testimony, they attempted to create a rough description of the attacker. However, this was made more difficult by the fact that Jason could not see the attacker's face clearly. The apartment was too dark and the attacker lunged at him as soon as he entered the room. Investigators also discovered several suspicious items in the room, including a hat, a record player, and a stereo near the back stairs. At first, they thought these items might belong to Johnny or Jason, but Jason denied owning them. This led them to suspect that these items might have been left behind by the killer. Police shared a rough sketch of the suspect with the media, and they subsequently received hundreds of calls from the public. Many people reported individuals who matched the sketch, prompting detectives to pursue each of these leads. One of the prominent clues led investigators to a group of teenagers who had broken into homes with the intention of burglarizing. One member of the group, a 19-year-old named Michael, matched the sketch of the suspect. The police began searching for Michael, but this was not easy because he was wanted for burglary. 2 police units joined the search for him, and they eventually found Michael. When interrogating Michael, investigators immediately noticed his shoes, which had a pattern similar to the footprints left by the killer. They collected Michael's DNA and fingerprints and sent them to experts for analysis. During the interrogation, Michael revealed a surprising piece of information. He and a friend had entered Johnny's apartment that night. According to Michael, they planned to rob, but his friend attacked Johnny with a knife. However, detectives soon discovered inconsistencies in Michael's story. The details he provided did not match the actual events, and there was no evidence of 2 strangers at the crime scene. Michael's DNA and fingerprints also did not match the evidence at the scene. Michael's shoes also did not match the tread pattern in Jason's room. Investigators concluded that Michael had made up the story. This is not uncommon, as some people may falsely confess to crimes in order to seek attention or reward. Michael's motives remained unclear, but his story was completely untrue. Police subsequently interviewed more than 1,000 potential suspects and collected about 400 DNA samples, but none of them matched the evidence at the scene. Early in the murder investigation, authorities offered a reward for information leading to a solution to the case. The reward grew each month, and by December 2005, it had reached $60,000. The governor then added another $20,000 to bring the case to the attention of the public. Despite many clues, all were dead ends, and the case remained unsolved for many years. In 2007, Johnny's parents decided to take matters into their own hands by looking into changes in state law. They noticed that the killer's fingerprints and DNA did not appear in any databases, which raised suspicions about his brutality. They assumed that the killer had a criminal record, so they investigated Tennessee law. Through their investigation, they discovered that, according to Tennessee law, fingerprints and DNA samples could only be collected from convicted criminals. So Johnny's parents expressed their desire to change this law. They played a key role in drafting a new law that required fingerprints and DNA samples to be collected from all people arrested for violent crimes. After gaining support from the government, the law was passed in May 2007. 2 months later, a breakthrough occurred. Police arrested 22-year-old Taylor Lee Olson for violating the terms of his probation. Olson had a criminal record, including theft, check forgery, and auto theft, and had been arrested several times. Surprisingly, however, police had never collected his fingerprints or DNA. Olson lived with his girlfriend and newborn daughter, but he continued to commit crimes. 5 months earlier, police had begun investigating Olson for his suspected involvement in the murder of Johnny. However, they had not been able to analyze his DNA at the time. But after Olson was arrested for violating his probation, police decided to question him about the details of the Johnny case. Olson eventually confessed to his role in the murder and voluntarily provided a DNA sample. The DNA test showed that Olson's sample matched the one found in the victim's apartment. Additionally, Olson's fingerprints matched the fingerprints on the murder weapon. Olson claimed that he intended to steal Johnny's car that night and entered the apartment through the back door to look for the keys. When he entered Johnny's room, she woke up and began screaming. In a panic, Olson grabbed a kitchen knife and attacked her multiple times. Olson insisted that he had no intention of killing anyone and that the incident was an unfortunate accident. Investigators were suspicious of some of the details and suspected that Taylor had planned to kill Johnny in advance. They believed that he may have been following Johnny for some time, which was supported by Johnny's friends reporting that someone was following her in a car at the time. Although there was no concrete evidence to prove this, this became more credible after Olson was arrested. When Olson's trial was scheduled to begin in mid-2008, he hired an attorney. His attorney advised him to withdraw his original confession, and Olson gave a new account to investigators. According to this new account, Olson claimed that he had entered Jania's apartment with his friend, Noah Cox. When Olson entered Jania's room to get his car keys, Jania allegedly woke up, grabbed a knife, and stabbed Olson multiple times. Olson then fled through the back door while his friend entered Jania's room, disarmed Jania, and killed her. Taylor Olson's new story raised suspicions among police. They found no fingerprints or DNA of others at the crime scene, leading them to believe that no one else was involved. Detectives waited for the trial to begin, but it never did. On March 28, 2008, Taylor Olson committed suicide in his jail cell. Along with him, detectives found several suicide notes addressed to his family, Jania's relatives, and the police. In the letter to detectives, he accused his friend Noah Cox of being the real culprit and apologized to Jania's family and his family. However, detectives still believed that Olson was responsible for the murders. They questioned Noah several times but found no evidence implicating him. Jania's parents were also skeptical of Olson's final confession. They felt that if Olson was truly innocent, he would not have committed suicide. Olson had consistently maintained that he had entered the apartment alone for months after his initial confession. His sudden change in story to blame his friend raised further suspicions. Hi everyone, thanks for returning. Let's unravel another perplexing mystery. The case of Kate Waring. Kate Waring was born in Charleston, South Carolina, USA. She grew up in a loving family with 2 siblings, and her parents always tried their best to give their children the best life possible. As a child, Kate showed a deep love and compassion for animals, which led her to start volunteering at various animal shelters at a young age. As a teenager, she was a dancer and had a wide social circle, known for her positive attitude and outlook on life. Everyone assumed she had an educational good background, and to some extent, this was true. However, one fateful day, her life changed completely. Just before going to college, Kate opened up to her parents about being abused by someone close to the family when she was younger. Kate's parents were shocked by this confession. They felt guilty for not knowing the hardships their daughter had faced over the years. After learning this heartbreaking truth about their daughter, Kate's parents did everything they could to help her overcome it, but unfortunately, this traumatic experience left behind long-lasting consequences that became increasingly serious over time. Kate had struggled with addiction to both alcohol and illegal substances. Kate's parents recommended therapy to help her work through her issues, and she agreed to give it a try. They also suggested she move back in with them, thinking the family environment would aid in her recovery. Initially, the therapy seemed effective, but Kate continued to grapple with the emotional weight of her past, making it difficult for her to move forward. Kate's life underwent a major transformation when her psychiatrist diagnosed her with depression. Her father proposed a trip to anywhere in the world, which Kate eagerly accepted. She chose to travel to the Arctic Circle, driven by her long-held desire to see polar bears. Kate and her parents searched for suitable tours and eventually booked a trip. As the journey approached, Kate's parents noticed a marked change in her attitude, shifting from sadness to cheerful and positive. During the trip, Kate and her parents shared a wonderful experience, filled with joy and laughter. On the boat to the Arctic Circle, Kate met a fellow Russian tourist. They kept in touch throughout the trip, and when the trip ended, they still exchanged letters. Kate developed strong feelings for him, and eventually, which led her to make the decision to travel to Russia. Kate had finally begun to overcome her depression after traveling with her family in another country. However, due to visa issues, she was forced to return home. Despite this incident, Kate seems to have found joy in her life again. She planned to resolve her visa problems and had even started writing a book for her children. But everything changed on Saturday, June 12, 2009. Kate's family was away on a business trip, and she was alone at home. Normally, Kate would call her father to check in, but this time she didn't. Her father tried to reach her, but there was no answer. Concerned about her well-being, especially given her past struggles with addiction, her father asked someone to check on her. When the person arrived at Kate's home, they found her room empty, but the light was still on, suggesting that she had just stepped out and would return soon. However, Kate's medication, which she needed to take regularly, was still at home. Her parents were anxious, but they decided not to panic, thinking that Kate, being 28 years old, was capable of taking care of herself. They decided to wait until Monday, at which point her parents intended to contact the police. On Monday morning, Kate's father received a call from the bank. A bank employee informed him that someone had tried to cash a check for over $4,000 from Kate's account. The bank was unable to contact Kate, so they reached out to her father. This situation raised suspicions, as Kate's father knew she only had a few $100s in her account. The bank security team contacted Kate's father due to the large amount of the check. Although Kate's signature on the check appeared to be genuine, the bank still had concerns. The man who tried to cash the check was identified as Ethan Mack. Kate's father did not recognize Ethan's name, but he assumed Ethan might be an acquaintance of Kate's since the bank had verified her signature. As Kate was still unreachable, her father decided to contact the police. The police launched an investigation into Kate's disappearance and began by questioning Ethan Mack. Ethan claimed to have known Kate for years and stated that she had written the check to pay off old debts. He also claimed that he had frequently lent Kate money for various purchases, including clothing and jewelry. Investigations into Kate's disappearance led detectives to speak with her friends. They revealed that Kate had a long-standing friendship with Ethan. Although they were very close, her friends insisted that the relationship was not love. Ethan told detectives that he met Kate on Friday night and took her out for dinner at a restaurant. After dinner, he drove her home and then went about his own business. To support his alibi, Ethan showed detectives text messages he had exchanged with Kate, confirming their dinner plans. He also allowed detectives to search his home, where he lived with his mother, but nothing suspicious was found. However, the police still suspect his connection with the check and did not rule Ethan out as list of suspects. Detectives reconstructed Kate's activities on Friday night to determine her last whereabouts before she disappeared. She had seen her therapist in the afternoon and then visited the gym. Later, Kate entered a store and purchased a bottle of wine. Security footage showed her talking on the phone at the time, and it is possible that she was speaking with Ethan, who later picked her up and took her to dinner. Kate's parents remembered another unsettling detail from the day she went missing. Although she mentioned having some problems, she didn't specify what they were. Unfortunately, her parents did not remember this conversation until a few days later, and by then, the information was too late to be of any help in the search. As the weeks went by, Kate remained missing. Her parents felt frustrated with the police, believing they weren't doing enough to find Kate. However, in August, the case gained new information when a team of former police officers, led by lawyer Andy Savage, took it on. This team had been privately investigating unsolved cases and was particularly drawn to Kate's. The team consisted of 5 individuals, and all have significant experience in the investigative field. One of them, former Detective James Randall, began by examining Kate's bedroom. He noticed 2 suspicious things. Firstly, he found a packet of medication that Kate took regularly. Kate's parents confirmed that she was very diligent in taking her medication, so the fact that the packet was left behind was highly alarming. Next, a team member found Chinese currency on Kate's bed, which raised questions since Kate's parents had no idea where she got it or why she needed it. To gather more information, the team brought in Bobby Mitter, an expert in tracking individuals online. His skills are really useful. Bobby discovered that on the night Kate disappeared, she called her friend James around 10 p.m. but he didn't answer. Kate left a disturbing voicemail saying someone had stolen her credit cards. Kate's phone was last active at 1:53 a.m. for some unknown reason when she called her own voicemail. Further investigation by member Lewis revealed that the call was made from James Island, just a few kilometers from Kate's house. Another team member, Eugene Fraser, spoke with acquaintances on James Island and found something suspicious. Ethan Mack, who had allowed police to search his mother's home, didn't actually live there. Instead, he rented an apartment in a nearby building. Eugene's acquaintance, who happened to be Ethan's landlord, provided this crucial information. The detectives dug deeper and discovered that the police had not Ethan thoroughly investigated. They had only done a cursory search of his mother's house. The team decided to take matters into their own hands and began their own investigation. In the process, they found out that Ethan had a girlfriend named Heather Camp. When they asked Kate's parents about Heather, her mother remembered a strange encounter. About a month before Kate's disappearance, Kate had met Heather on a train from Washington, D.C., where Kate was experiencing visa issues to Russia. Heather had told Kate that she had been robbed of her wallet and was now destitute. Kate offered to help and lent her a substantial amount of money. Heather said she has found a job as a pediatric surgeon in South Carolina and will start work soon. Heather later said that her daughter had tragically died in a car accident in New Jersey. Her actions following this announcement seemed irrational and confusing. She did not go there, and her demeanor suggested that her daughter's death did not affect her greatly. Furthermore, they discovered that Heather was facing fraud charges in Indiana. She had impersonated a licensed physician by falsifying paperwork. The team gathered significant data, forcing them to re-examine the case from a new perspective. However, when they presented their findings to the police were completely reluctant to continue the investigation. The team discovered that the only way to get the police to take action was to gather undeniable proof that connected Heather to Kate's disappearance. To obtain this evidence, the team took drastic measures. They convinced the person who rented an apartment to Ethan Mack to install a hidden camera outside his apartment door. Additionally, they placed a GPS tracker in Ethan's car, allowing them to monitor his movements. Their efforts soon paid off. After analyzing Ethan's travel patterns, the detectives discovered that he had visited multiple pawn shops throughout the city. They followed his trail and found that at each shop, Ethan was selling small batches of jewelry. Although they couldn't confirm whether the jewelry belonged to Kate, the detectives felt they were closing in on a crucial lead. The group then hits a major roadblock when Ethan and Heather's landlord threatens to evict them because they haven't paid their rent. This made the detectives' investigation difficult, as losing access to the apartment would hinder their ability to monitor Ethan and Heather's activities. To address this issue, the detectives devised a plan to persuade the landlord to grant Ethan and Heather an extension on their rent payment. In exchange, the landlord required both Ethan and Heather to sign a contract committing to pay the outstanding debt. The team successfully negotiated this arrangement, and once the contract was signed, they immediately sent it to the laboratory for analysis. The primary objective was to compare the handwriting on the contract with Kate's signature on the $4,000 check. The results yielded a significant breakthrough. The handwriting expert confirmed, with absolute certainty, that the signature on the check matched Heather's handwriting on the contract. The team discovered that Heather had forged Kate's signature. However, they knew the police would be uncooperative, so they devised a new plan. They convinced the landlord to help them by telling Ethan that the apartment needed insect treatment. The team leader, dressed as an exterminator, accompanied the landlord to the apartment. But their plan almost failed. They realized Ethan only moved the car away from the house and did not actually leave. Upon entering the apartment, the investigator and the landlord were met with an unexpected surprise. Ethan was still at home, and Heather was the one driving his car. The investigator then had to think quickly and adjust his plan. They insist that the apartment needs to be disinfected and ask Ethan to wait outside while they spray the dangerous disinfectant. Ethan, unaware of the investigation, agreed to leave his apartment. Meanwhile, investigators begin searching for evidence to prove Ethan's involvement in Kate's disappearance. They found Ethan's backpack and examined its contents. Discovering Chinese money, it resembles the bills found on Kate's bed. However, the search yielded no other significant clues. The investigator and the landlord pretended to complete their task and left. The team needed a new strategy. After reviewing the footage from the camera outside Ethan's apartment, they noticed a man frequently entering the building, Terry Williams, a neighbor of the couple. The detective suspected that Terry might have information about Ethan and Heather's involvement in Kate's disappearance. The team decided to take a risk and offered Terry a substantial sum of money in exchange for his cooperation. They visited Terry's apartment with the offer, hoping he would reveal what he knew about Kate's disappearance. Detectives encountered an unexpected situation when they told Terry what was happening. Unbeknownst to them, Heather was at her home and overheard the conversation between the detectives and Terry. When the detectives started talking to Terry, Heather was extremely frightened. She immediately called Ethan and explained the situation in a hysterical state. The investigation team did not expect this, and they spent the next few days coming up with another plan. However, Terry later contacted the detectives and invited them to his home to discuss. Upon arriving at Terry's apartment, he reveals that although Ethan and Heather did not directly tell him about their involvement in Kate's disappearance, but he had suspected that the couple had done something wrong to Kate. Terry then produced an iPod that Heather had given him shortly after Kate's disappearance. He had assumed the iPod belonged to Kate. The detectives examined the device and, using its serial number, confirmed that it indeed belonged to Kate. This discovery provided the investigation team with sufficient evidence to return to the police department. The local police could no longer ignore the case and decided to take action. After reviewing the evidence gathered by the team, they arrested Ethan and Heather. During the initial interrogation, Heather agreed to cooperate in exchange for a reduced sentence. She claimed Kate's body was on Wat Allah Island, approximately 20 miles from her house. However, when the police searched the area, they found no of Kate's body. It became clear that Heather had given them false information. Andy Savage then tried a different approach, suspecting Heather's direct involvement in Kate's murder. He met with her and offered a deal. In exchange for revealing Kate's body location, he would help get her off the forgery charges papers. Heather, seeing this as her only chance, agreed to the deal. She provided a detailed description of the location on the outskirts of Wat Allah Island, claiming Kate's body was still there. The detectives decided to search the area without police accompaniment, but they were initially disappointed when they found nothing. However, they returned the next day, and they eventually discovered Kate's body. The forensic doctors were unable to determine the cause of Kate's death. But the truth eventually came to light when Heather began to confess. In August 2009, Heather signed a confession admitting to murder, obstruction of justice, and bank check forgery. The police investigation revealed that Heather had been committing fraud for years and had targeted Kate as her next victim during a trip from Washington. Heather later met Ethan and started a romantic relationship with him. Ethan, however, did not immediately plead guilty, and his trial began in October 2010. The prosecution used Heather's testimony to reconstruct the incident surrounding Kate's disappearance. According to Heather's account, on the day Kate vanished, Kate discovered that Heather had deceived her and stolen her credit cards. Kate threatened to inform her father. Heather confided in Ethan, who chose to support her despite his long-standing friendship with Kate. The investigation revealed that Kate was not alone with Ethan on the night she disappeared. Heather was also present. It appears that Heather and Ethan attempted to negotiate with Kate at a restaurant, trying to persuade Kate not to expose Heather's deception. During this meeting, Heather may have promised Kate that when she got to Ethan's apartment, Heather would return the stolen credit card to her. Upon Kate's arrival, Heather and Ethan may have been waiting for the right moment to end her life. However, the court ultimately questioned Heather's account of the incident and found her guilty, sentencing her to 39 years in prison. Ethan received a slightly more lenient sentence of 25 years. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of John Parker. John Parker was born in 1970 in Indiana, United States, to a middle-class family and have a brother. From a young age, John had a strong ambition to succeed. He valued being independent and continually sought ways to better himself, as well as looking for opportunities for growth and advancement. After graduating from high school, John began searching for ways to earn money. According to his brother, John's first job was as a waiter's assistant in a restaurant. However, he quit his job soon after, but the exact reason for his departure is unclear. Undeterred, John quickly found a new job that offered more freedom, allowing him to explore and develop his passion for pursuing a career in sales. John started working as a door-to-door salesman for Kirby vacuum cleaners. Initially, his family teased him, but he soon demonstrated his capabilities to everyone, and he also found his purpose in life. By the end of his first year, John had become one of the company's top salesmen, and he was eager to continue achieving more. John worked extremely long hours, typically between 12 to 16 hours a day. As a result, he became a top sales performer, earning recognition at company meetings. John's success also made him a source of inspiration and guidance for his fellow salespeople. During this time, he met Judy, a 20-year-old woman from a low-income family in Texas. Judy was born in October 1969. She was confident extremely and outgoing. Although John wasn't planning to hire any additional salespeople at the time, but she was able to convince John that she had what it took to achieve great success in sales. Judy's past was marked by significant life events. With her parents' consent, she had gotten married at the age of 14 and had 2 children, Christina and Daniel Hicks, but it ultimately ended in divorce. When she met John, she was determined to start a new chapter in her life. John decided to give Judy a chance, taking her under his wing as a mentor in vacuum cleaner sales. Not only did Judy prove herself as a valuable member of the sales team, but she also won John's heart. As time passed, they began to date. John's life was thriving, both personally and professionally. He has built a solid reputation for his sales and training abilities, and most importantly, he has the love and support of his wife Judy. John expanded on his experience by starting his own business in Michigan, specializing in selling and servicing Kirby vacuum cleaners. He also offered training sessions for salespeople, sharing his personal secrets and enthusiasm that had made him successful in the industry. John's company quickly rose to the top in the area, and he credited his success to Judy's support. After establishing his career, John and Judy got married in 1992. The couple had 2 daughters, Tiffany and Erica. As John's business continued to thrive, they relocated to better homes, providing their children with access to excellent schools, luxury cars, and regular vacations. Initially, John had a very good relationship with Judy's stepchildren, Christina and Daniel. Christina was a sweet girl, while Daniel was more energetic and mischievous. The family enjoyed a comfortable life, thanks to John's growing wealth. He openly showcased his success to motivate the young salespeople he trained, demonstrating the potential rewards of hard work and determination. However, as Judy's children entered their teenage years, problems arose. Christina associated with a group of friends who had unhealthy habits, and as a result she started drinking with them. According to some reports, Christina has also used drugs. Meanwhile, Daniel, 13, often appears angry and doesn't seem to fit in with his friends. On one occasion, Daniel took John's car and recklessly drove around the neighborhood with friends, damaging several mailbox posts. The next day, John visited each affected house, compensating the homeowners for the damage to prevent them from filing a police report about the boys' actions. Around this time, John was also summoned to Daniel's school that the boy had misbehaved and they needed to discuss the issue. John and Judy's relationship became strained after he got into a physical altercation with Daniel. After 9 years together, Judy took her family to Texas to visit her childhood home and meet her brother. During the trip, Judy confided in her brother about her troubled marriage and John's mistreatment of her children. However, the situation was more complex. Judy's older children were misbehaving, and she took their side, which added to the tension. Things escalated when John suspected Judy of having an affair with one of his employees. John installed cameras in the office to gather evidence. When he obtained proof of Judy's infidelity, his life was turned upside down, and his demeanor changed drastically. He began to drink heavily, which led to intense arguments with Judy and rough treatment of their children. One incident involved his daughter Tiffany, who was beaten with a belt for not bringing her homework to school. When her teacher noticed the marks the next day, she reported it to social services. Before they arrived, John warned the 4 kids that if they wanted to maintain their luxurious lifestyle, they should say nothing about the beating. Consequently, Tiffany blamed her stepbrother Daniel. John's bad mood not only affected his family but also his employees and clients, who suffered from his outbursts of rage. To keep Judy away from her lover, John moved the family to an exclusive area in Crown Point, Indiana. Despite his hopes for a fresh start, things did not improve. Judy started to improve her appearance by losing weight and changing her look, while John let himself go, growing his beard, smoking, and wearing only jeans. He became increasingly distracted. The business struggled due to John's condition, nearly going bankrupt and forcing him to sell his boat to stay afloat. Office rumors swirled about Judy's alleged affair with Jeff, John's right-hand man, fueling more arguments. At one point, Judy told John she wanted a divorce, but it wouldn't be straightforward. John felt he had given Judy everything, rescuing her from poverty, accepting her children, and showering her with luxuries. When love turns to resentment, he began cutting off Judy's financial sources. John made it clear that if she left, she would leave with nothing, and he had a secret recording of her infidelity with the office employee. This was the situation at the start of 2003. The tension between John and Judy affected the children, whose behavior worsened. Even Tiffany was grounded during the holidays for starting a fire on school grounds with a friend. The arguments finally ended on Thursday, April 17, 2013, when John and Judy went out to dinner. They were likely looking for a way to resolve issues and reduce the tension between them. After dinner, the couple called home to check on their kids and told them they would be back soon. Then, Christina asked them to stop by the office because she had left a school notebook there. As John and Judy left the restaurant, John decided to bring the leftover dinner to Jeff, who was supposedly working late at the office. John and Judy arrived at the office, located in a deserted industrial area. Just before 10 p.m. John went inside to talk to Jeff, while Judy picked up Christina's notebook and returned to the car. A few minutes later, John came out of the office and opened the rear door on the driver's side of the car to look for something. Suddenly, 2 loud bangs were heard, and John collapsed on the ground. Judy and Jeff immediately called 911. Police and medical units arrived at the scene within minutes. Unfortunately, John, 33 years old, had been shot in the back of the head and was pronounced dead at the scene. When questioned by the police, Judy, who was inside the car when the incident happened, was unable to provide much information. Judy said she was sitting in the car when John came out of the office and opened the back door on the driver's side. Immediately, she heard 2 loud shots. Judy's reaction was to hide behind the seat. When she finally lifted her head, she caught a glimpse of a man in dark clothing running away from the car. Initially, it seemed like a robbery because John's wallet was missing. However, as investigators examined the scene more closely, they began to have doubts. John and Judy hadn't told anyone they would be there, which raised several questions. What were the chances of a random robbery in a deserted industrial are very rare. If the motive had been robbery, it's puzzling that the perpetrator would first kill John and then take his wallet. This is especially confusing since John was visibly wearing a valuable gold Rolex and other easily accessible jewelry. Typically, thieves would thoroughly search the victim's pockets in such situations. The fact that this didn't happen raises more questions than answers. 2 bullet casings were found at the scene, which supports Judy's account of hearing 2 shots. One shot killed John instantly, but there's no official information about the second shot. With many unanswered questions, investigators started work taking a statement from Judy. Judy reported that her husband had argued with an employee from his company prior to the incident and identified the individual. However, she couldn't provide any additional information beyond her initial statement at the scene. Jeff, who was inside the office, also couldn't offer any useful insights, as when he heard the gunshots and went outside, it was all over. Meanwhile, authorities informed Christina, a Parker resident, that her stepfather had passed away. With robbery ruled out as a motive, detectives turned their attention to John's circle of relatives and colleagues. They began with an employee who had allegedly argued with John, but the employee claimed they had resolved their issues amicably and had a verified alibi. The investigation expanded, include John's business partners, employees, competitors, friends, and family. Judy's behavior during the funeral surprised and puzzled many people, as she seemed cheerful and socialized with friends, which was unexpected given the circumstances. Her ex-husband was also seen casually reading a newspaper at the funeral. For days after the murder, police brought in 15-year-old Daniel for questioning because he was accused of hiring gang members to kill his stepfather, John. When questioned, Daniel admitted to paying someone to hurt John, but claimed he only wanted him injured, not killed. The police arrested one of the young men that Daniel had hired, but they were released after their alibi checked out. Daniel was also released after 9 days due to lack of evidence and his status as a minor. Later, it was discovered that John had problems with Judy's children, which led to further investigation into Daniel and raised suspicions about Judy's 17-year-old daughter, Christina. When questioned, Christina denied any involvement, and this lead also went nowhere. However, investigators were left wondering who was providing the money for these schemes, and they suspected Judy was the source. Further investigation showed that Judy and John's relationship had gotten much worse before he died, and Judy's affair was discovered. However, sources revealed that John had no plans to leave his wife and was trying to save their relationship. Judy's main reason for targeting her husband seemed to be financial gain, as detectives found that John had 2 life insurance policies worth $1 million. After John's death, Judy tried to claim this money, but the insurance company initially refused to pay due to the ongoing investigation. Receiving the insurance money becomes even more complicated when John's father suspects Judy of being involved in his son's death. Despite these leads, the case stalled due to lack of concrete evidence. Over time, the John family household underwent substantial transformations. Judy was rarely at home, as she was busy with her new partner, Jeff, who was John's trusted manager. In Judy's absence, Christina and Daniel took care of Tiffany and Erica. Later, Judy and Jeff moved out of state with Tiffany and Erica, while Daniel went to live with his biological father. Christina, who was pregnant and had a boyfriend, stayed in the house. Although the investigation had stalled, authorities kept the case open, regularly reviewing the files in hopes of finding new leads. Their persistence paid off when they came to question some of Christina and Daniel's classmates. These schoolmates admitted to selling a firearm to Christina and Daniel. This information prompted detectives to investigate a piece of land owned by the family that Christina used for target practice. Upon inspection, several bullet casings were found. Laboratory analysis revealed a crucial clue: the bullet casings matched those from the crime scene where John was killed. In 2007, a colleague who was a narcotics officer provided additional information. The narcotics officer had been tracking Christina's ex-boyfriend, who was involved in a drug case and was arrested, to request a lighter sentence. Christina's former boyfriend revealed a conversation he had with Judy. In this conversation, Judy mentioned that her son Daniel was the one who fired the fatal shot that killed John. When confronted with this new information, 21 years old, Christina, who was linked to the weapon used in the crime, began to cooperate. She admitted to buying the weapon and calling John and Judy on the night of the incident. She had asked them to stop by the office, claiming she needed to pick up forgotten homework. Christina confessed to being part of a plan to kill John, with her brother Daniel designated as the shooter. When Daniel was 19, he was found and arrested in Arizona. Daniel was shown new evidence about the shooting and Christina's statement. He admitted to shooting John, but said his mother, Judy, was the one who planned the whole thing. Daniel said Judy had forged checks from her company to get the $7,500 to hire someone to kill John. However, when the people she hired took the money without doing the job, Judy told them to buy a gun for Daniel to use instead. Daniel also said it was Judy's idea to make up a reason for leaving the house that night by calling about homework. He said he shot John once in the head, and the second shot was an accident that happened while he was looking through John's pockets for his wallet, as his mother had told him to do. Daniel was also told to come back home without telling his younger sisters what had happened. His sister Christina helped by keeping the girls busy watching TV. Daniel said Judy convinced them to commit the crime by telling them they were being abused by John. And Judy promises them a better life with more money and freedom. It was also discovered that Judy had previously attempted to kill her husband. She had tried to poison his food, which resulted in John being briefly hospitalized with what was thought to be food poisoning. By the end of 2007, Christina and Daniel were formally charged with murder and conspiracy. Christina pleaded not guilty to conspiracy and was released on bail. In March 2008, Daniel, then 20 years old, pleaded guilty to conspiracy to kill his stepfather, John. As part of a deal, Daniel agreed to admit his guilt and testify against his mother. The prosecution agreed not to charge him with murder, but he still faced a prison sentence of 20 to 25 years. Daniel claimed that when he was 14, about a year before the incident, his mother and sister asked him to help kill John. His mother gave him and his sister money to buy a pistol, black clothing, gloves, and a mask to wear on the day of the crime. She also instructed him on what to do, including showering after the crime to remove gunpowder residue. Judy took responsibility for disposing of the evidence, including the gun, clothes, and her husband's wallet. In July 2009, 6 years after John's death, Judy turned herself in and pleaded guilty to conspiracy to commit murder. She admitted to planning, executing, and covering up the crime. The prosecution asked for a sentence of 28 to 35 years in prison. Judy, almost 40, was sentenced to 33 years in late August 2009. Daniel was sentenced to 23 years in September, and Christina received a 5-year sentence in October. Press reports state that Daniel was released from custody in 2017. He then chose to keep a low profile. Christina served 4 years of her sentence and was released in 2013, but she tragically died from a drug overdose. This case was driven by greed. Although Judy was successful, her greater desires led her to terrible crimes. Judy's actions not only destroyed a successful business owner but also had a profound impact on her 4 children. Two of them ended up in prison, and the younger ones were left without their parents once again. Hello, crime enthusiasts. Are you ready for another chilling investigation? The case of Kirsten Hatfield. Kirsten Hatfield was born on February 12, 1989, in Midwest City, Oklahoma. Kirsten's father left the family soon after her birth, and her mother, Shannon, moved back in with grandparents. When Kirsten was 2 years old, they moved to their own home. Later, Shannon remarried, but the marriage was short-lived, leaving Shannon to care for her two young daughters alone. Kirsten, being the older sibling, took on a lot of responsibility, helping her mother care for her younger sister, Faith. Kirsten and Faith shared a bedroom, while their mother slept in the adjacent room. On May 13, 1997, Shannon put her daughters to bed as usual. Kirsten was 8 years old, and Faith was 3. However, Faith had already fallen asleep, so Shannon only said goodnight to Kirsten and left the door to their room slightly open, as she always did, in case Kirsten or Faith needed her. At around 3 a.m., Shannon was awoken by a noise coming from the girls' room. Thinking one of her daughters was awake, Shannon got out of bed to check on them. As she approached the door, the noise stopped. Assuming her daughters had gone back to sleep, Shannon was about to return to her room when she noticed that the door to their room was now completely closed. This was unusual, as she was certain she had left it slightly open. She wondered if one of them had closed the door or if she had simply forgotten to leave it open. Shannon opened the door slightly to check, but she didn't enter the room before returning to bed. Shannon went to wake up her daughters at 6:30 a.m. the next morning, but only found Faith in their bedroom. Shannon asked Faith where Kirsten was, and when Faith said she didn't know, Shannon began a thorough search of the house. However, Kirsten was nowhere to be found. Shannon then checked outside the house and contacted the parents of Kirsten's friends to see if she had come to their house. But no one had seen her. Shannon's search efforts led her to call her father, who lived nearby, to see if Kirsten had gone to his house or not. Unfortunately, he hadn't seen her either. At this point, Shannon realized Kirsten was missing, and her father advised her to call the police. When the police arrived, they initially thought Kirsten might be hiding in the house or had simply wandered off for a walk, given the town's low crime rate. However, upon inspecting Kirsten's room, they found the window slightly open with a few drops of blood on the frame. This raised their suspicions that something more serious had occurred. Further investigation led them to discover a piece of children's underwear stained with blood on the ground outside the window. After confirming with Shannon that the underwear belonged to Kirsten, the police realized they were likely dealing with a kidnapping. More officers were called to the scene to assist with the investigation, which marked the beginning of a more extensive search for Kirsten. The police investigation into Kirsten's disappearance began with a search of the area around the house. During this search, the police spoke with Kirsten's mother, who reported hearing a noise at 3 a.m. and now realized that it may have been the sound of her daughter being taken. Despite the search, nothing suspicious was found, and the police began canvassing the neighborhood, speaking with all the residents. Unfortunately, none of the neighbors reported seeing or hearing anything unusual on the night of the abduction. However, one neighbor did mention being woken up by a barking dog around 3 a.m., which coincided with the time of the abduction. With no solid leads, investigators turned to a child psychologist to interview Faith, who was only 3 years old. Despite her young age, Faith was able to share what she had witnessed, but her statement was limited to a single phrase: "A bad person came and took my sister." This confirmed that Kirsten had not left the house voluntarily, but unfortunately, it did not provide any further information about the perpetrator or Kirsten's whereabouts. Detectives had to restart the investigation practically from scratch. Their initial suspicion leaned towards someone who knew Kirsten well, as it seemed unlikely that a stranger could abduct her from her own room without a sound. Working on this theory, police discovered that Kirsten's mother, Shannon, had a history of drug-related problems. The detectives considered the possibility that the abduction might be related to this. Perhaps the mother owed money to some people in the criminal underworld, and they decided to take her daughter as payment. The police did not rule out the mother willingly handing over her daughter. This would explain why the abduction happened almost silently. The investigation into Kirsten's disappearance continued, with detectives initially speaking to Shannon, her mother. Shannon denied any involvement, claiming to have been clean from substance abuse for some time and insisting she would never harm her daughter. Although detectives were not convinced of Shannon's innocence, they could not find any evidence to prove her involvement. The police then turned to the public for help, using the media to ask for any information that might be relevant to the case. In response, they received hundreds of calls, but most of the calls were fruitless. However, one clue provided a promising lead. A woman reported her boyfriend's suspicious behavior, including aggressive outbursts and a disturbing threat he made during an argument. The police investigated the man and discovered that he knew Shannon's brother, which meant Kirsten might have known him too. Additionally, the man had a history of drug use and assault, and he had previously been familiar with the Hatfield family home. Despite this, the investigation ultimately found that the man had a solid alibi for the time Kirsten went missing. Multiple witnesses confirmed that he was at a bar until around 4 a.m. on the night of the disappearance, making it impossible for him to have abducted Kirsten. Detectives pursued multiple leads, but each one led to a dead end. As time passed, the hope of finding Kirsten alive began to fade. Kirsten's mother, Shannon, refused to give up. She took matters into her own hands, determined to find her daughter. She gave interviews to local media outlets, distributed flyers, and even investigated potential suspects on her own. However, Shannon faced numerous obstacles. Many local businesses refused to display Kirsten's flyers, citing company policies. She also attempted to meet with the state governor, but was unsuccessful. Shannon established a volunteer center to help find Kirsten. The center focused on distributing flyers and engaging with the media. However, Shannon encountered new challenges. Some volunteers stole money, lied about their work, and used the media to gain attention for themselves. Despite these setbacks, Shannon persevered in her search for the truth. After years of effort, Shannon realized that her approach was not yielding results. She enrolled in college, earned a degree in criminology, and became a parole officer. Shannon's goal was not only to find her daughter's kidnapper but also to protect others from potentially dangerous criminals who might be released from prison. Shannon suspected Kirsten's kidnapper had a history of violent crimes. To pursue this lead, she researched people with violent pasts in her area but found no connection to Kirsten's disappearance. Despite her efforts, she eventually had to accept that Kirsten might have passed away and might not return. Still, Shannon continued to search for answers. Periodically, police reopened the case to investigate new leads, working with the FBI to create an updated sketch of Kirsten's possible appearance. In 2014, there was a breakthrough in the Kirsten case. A woman contacted the police and shared a shocking discovery she had made while sorting through her late mother's belongings. Among her mother's possessions was a diary detailing the woman's father's confession, claiming he had killed Kirsten Hatfield. The diary was extremely detailed, and detectives were convinced of its accuracy. According to the diary, the man had kidnapped Kirsten from her bedroom, took her to a house he owned in a nearby town, and murdered her after horribly torturing her. The description of the crime process spanned many pages, leaving even veteran investigators confused. The diary also revealed that the crime had been recorded on a videotape. Investigators immediately questioned the woman's father. However, his reaction was surprising. While he denied any involvement in the Kirsten case, He asserted that he had known who was responsible for Kirsten's death, saying the murder had occurred at his ex-girlfriend's house. The police were confused and asked for the house address. They quickly received a warrant and sent a team to thoroughly search this house. The forensic investigation began with a crucial step: the use of luminol, a substance that glows when exposed to very small amounts of blood. When the forensic team applied luminol to the scene, they were surprised by the results. An expert later described the house as lit up like a Christmas tree due to the numerous bloodstains. The bloodstains matched the details of the murder described in the diary, leading the team to believe they had finally found concrete evidence. To investigate further, police removed the floorboards, cut out sections of wallpaper and sent these items to a laboratory for analysis. They also organized an excavation team in the hope of finding the victim's body. In addition, the police also discovered a box containing hundreds of videotapes in the house, so they had to review the diary. They suspected that one of the tapes might have contained footage of the victim being abused. Detectives meticulously reviewed each tape, but after hours of analysis, none of the tapes were related to the murder. Excavations also proved fruitless, with no remains or evidence found in the soil. However, just when the investigation seemed to have been gaining momentum, the police encountered an unexpected and shocking episode. Experts who analyzed the bloodstains in the house concluded that the bloodstains had actually belonged to an animal, not a human. This revelation left the police stunned and wondering what had just happened. Had someone deliberately deceived them with a cruel joke? Or was the person writing the diary struggling with mental health issues and convinced by a false narrative that had developed in their mind? The truth was still unknown. Detectives had run out of leads in Kirsten's case, and the case was once again stalled. In an effort to revive the investigation, the case was reassigned to a new detective named Daryl Miller in the summer of 2015. Miller decided to start from scratch and review all existing documents and records. During his scrutiny, Miller discovered something surprising. His predecessors had overlooked some key evidence, including blood found on Kirsten's windowsill and on her underwear. The evidence had been stored in a warehouse, but shockingly had never been sent to a laboratory for analysis. Miller suspected that the reason for this might have been because police initially thought the blood belonged to Kirsten, which would not have yielded any useful results. However, Miller decided to send them to the laboratory for analysis. The results were surprising. The blood sample did not belong to Kirsten, but to an unidentified man. This was a significant breakthrough after many years of investigation. Miller decided to collect DNA samples from all the men who had participated in the investigation since the kidnapping. Police tracked down each person on the list and sent their DNA to a lab for analysis. Everyone was cooperative and provided their DNA samples quickly. Miller patiently waited for the results, and finally he received a call from the lab. Experts had analyzed one of the samples and found a perfect match with bloodstains found on the window and the victim's underwear. The DNA belonged to Anthony Palma, 56, the Hatfield family's neighbor who lived across the street. Anthony had been one of the first people the police spoke to on the day of the abduction. At the time, he claimed to have woken up around 3 a.m. due to his dog barking. Now that his DNA had been linked to the crime scene, detectives decided to bring him in for further questioning. Although the DNA evidence was sufficient for a conviction, the investigators hoped to obtain a confession from Anthony. A confession would expedite the trial and potentially lead them to Kirsten's body, which was still missing. To get Anthony to talk, the detectives invited him for questioning, telling him it was a routine process. They claimed they were re-interviewing everyone, including neighbors, to gather new information. In reality, their goal was to get Anthony to admit whether he had ever been inside the Hatfield family home. Detectives asked Anthony to recall any additional details about the night in question. He retold the same story he had shared 18 years earlier. But this time he added a new detail. He claimed to have seen a white car parked outside Kirsten's house, although he didn't think much of it at the time. The police then asked Anthony about his relationship with Kirsten and her family. He stated that he knew them as neighbors, but he had never interacted with Kirsten personally. He maintained that he got along well with the other neighborhood children, who would often ask him for help fixing their bikes or visit him for candy. This conversation became a critical point in the investigation, as the police had discovered Anthony's blood on the windowsill of Kirsten's bedroom. When they asked if he had ever entered the house, Anthony claimed he had not. This statement raised suspicions, as the presence of his blood suggested otherwise. The detectives faced a challenge. Anthony's blood was fresh, suggesting it had been left recently, but he had had a visit to the house when it belonged to a friend. The investigators decided to move forward with the interrogation, informing Anthony that his blood had been found in Kirsten's room and on her underwear. Anthony repeatedly denied ever entering the house, despite the evidence to the contrary. The investigators attempted to extract a confession, but he consistently maintained his innocence. The detectives changed their approach and exited the room, leaving Detective Miller to speak with Anthony privately. Miller entered with a photo of Kirsten, placing it in front of Anthony. However, Anthony promptly pushed the photo away, refusing to look at it for the remainder of the conversation. Miller asked various questions, attempting to prompt Anthony into a confession, but he continued to deny any involvement. Failing to obtain an admission of guilt, the police ended the interrogation and apprehended Anthony. A subsequent search of his residence, made possible by a search warrant, uncovered no evidence of Kirsten's remains or any other relevant evidence. During the trial, Anthony repeatedly denied any involvement in the crime. But DNA evidence told a different story. As the trial progressed, new details emerged that the police had initially overlooked. It was revealed that Anthony had a history of run-ins with the law, including a prior conviction for breaking into a girl's bedroom and assaulting her. He had also been imprisoned in the 1980s for a violent attack involving a weapon. Anthony's past convictions signaled his dangerousness, yet were overlooked in 1997. In 2017, a jury returned a guilty verdict for Kirsten's kidnapping and Kirsten's murder, and Anthony was sentenced to life in prison. Despite the guilty verdict, Anthony never disclosed the location of Kirsten's body. Kirsten's mother refused to give up hope, however. She consistently reached out to Anthony, calling and visiting him in prison, in an effort to find out where Kirsten's body was. She spent hours trying to extract the truth from him, but ultimately, she was unsuccessful. Tragically, in 2019, Anthony was killed by his cellmate, who was motivated by a desire for revenge for Anthony's horrific crime against a child. As a result, Kirsten's family's only hope of finding Kirsten's body now depends on hikers or tourists who might stumble upon it in remote national parks, where Anthony may have buried her. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case. The case of Kaler family. James Craig Kaler was born in Weatherford, Texas in 1963, and his future wife, Karen Kaler, was born in the same city 2 years later. They met in the early 1980s while attending a university in Texas. At the time, Craig was a senior studying engineering, and Karen was a freshman in the humanities department. Despite their different fields of study, they quickly discovered common interests and started a romantic relationship. After graduating, they had a small, intimate wedding with close friends and family. They welcomed their first child, Emily, in 1991, followed by Lauren in 1993. The family lived in a cozy house in Weatherford and enjoyed a comfortable lifestyle, with a higher-than-average income for their area. In 1999, Craig received a lucrative job offer from a major utility company in Weatherford, which coincided with the birth of their son, Sean. Craig adored his son and, with his increased salary, purchased a spacious house in the city's most prestigious neighborhood and a family car. Karen stayed at home to care for their children, and Craig became the primary breadwinner. From the outside, their family appeared to be living a perfect life. Their 3 children have also had many successes in their fields. Emily and Lauren are talented in sports and music. Emily studies at a prestigious pharmacy college and Lauren hopes to attend a conservatory. Sean, on the other hand, showed a keen interest in mathematics and had dreams of becoming an archaeologist. The family's home life seemed idyllic, Craig providing for the family and Karen taking care of the household and raising the children. However, the family was struggling with hidden problems. In 2007, Karen confided in her sister Linda, revealing that she was on the verge of a nervous breakdown due to Craig's controlling behavior. Craig exerted total control over Karen's daily life, demanding a detailed account of every expense, no matter how small, and requiring her to report her whereabouts at all times. The family lives on a strict schedule, with Craig setting their daily routines, including bedtime, wake-up time, meal times. This rigidity makes Karen feel suffocated and trapped. Over time, Craig's need for control grew stronger. He became more demanding and selfish, scheduling Karen's every move. She felt like she had no time left for herself, there was only duty to complete. Karen tried to meet her husband's demands, hoping he would ease up and they could return to their normal life. However, Craig seemed to enjoy exerting control and refused to change. Linda was extremely worried about her sister's confide. Like everyone else, she saw Craig as the ideal husband, father, and family man, only to discover he was a controlling man. Despite this, Karen didn't want to break up her family. Additionally, she and her children relied on Craig financially. So, she decided to find a job that would give her a stable income. She joined a local gym without telling her husband, using it as an escape to clear her mind and work through her emotions. She spent several hours there every day, scheduling her time around her husband Craig's work schedule so he wouldn't notice. Not long after, the gym manager noticed her because of her attractive appearance, excellent fitness, and her hard work. Karen was given the chance to work as a fitness with the possibility of a permanent contract. This was a dream come true for her, as she could now get paid for doing something she loved. However, she was worried about how her husband, Craig, would react when he found out. When Craig found out about Karen's new job, she thought he would be angry and forbid her to continue. Surprisingly, he received this news calmly and even seemed pleased that she had found a way to make money on her own. He had a few conditions. She had to be home when he arrived, cook meals, and not let her new job interfere with their intimate life. Karen found these conditions acceptable, as she now had more freedom and independence. As Karen settled into her new job, she met a new instructor named Sunny Reese, and they quickly became friends. For Karen, who had spent years at home with little social interaction, Sunny became a trusted confidant. The two women spent time together at work, went for walks, had coffee, and shared heartfelt conversations. But little did Karen know, this new friendship would soon lead to unexpected romance and a complicated love triangle. It didn't take long for Karen and Sunny's friendship to evolve into a romantic relationship. At first, they kept their feelings a secret from everyone. However, after some time, Karen decided it was necessary to be honest with her husband, Craig. She spent months preparing for this conversation, searching for the right words and worrying about the potential consequences. Eventually, she confessed to Craig. Craig's reaction to his wife's revelation was surprisingly calm. However, the next day, he made an unexpected condition for accepting Karen's relationship with Sunny, which was that he wanted to be a part of it. Karen was shocked and unsure of how to respond to her husband's talk. Nevertheless, Craig took the initiative and began wooing Sunny, sending her flowers and gifts. He seemed to view this as an opportunity to revitalize his intimate life and bring new passion to his marriage. Initially, Karen and Sonny agreed to Craig's proposal. However, they soon realized that his intentions were aimed at domination. However, their unusual love triangle was short-lived. Craig demanded that Karen end the affair immediately. Despite this, Karen continued to see Sonny, as she had genuinely fallen in love. After almost 20 years of marriage, Karen seemed ready to leave her husband for someone new. This led to a series of secret actions, including moving to another state, scheduling secret meetings. In an attempt to salvage his family, Craig thought it best to relocate to another state. He started job hunting, sending out his resume, and soon secured a role as a water director for a large company in Columbia, Missouri, not far from Kansas. Craig hoped that by moving to a new state, his wife's affair with Sonny would end, and their family life would normalize. However, the summer 2008 move proved challenging for the family, as the kids had to switch schools, make new friends, and adapt to a new city. Although the family was already financially comfortable, Craig's new job nearly doubled his previous salary from Weatherford. Despite his increased responsibilities and work hours, Craig mistakenly believed he had successfully removed Sonny from his wife's life. However, Karen and Sonny continued to communicate regularly through calls, texts, and secret meetings. They would meet halfway, spend a couple of hours in a roadside hotel, and then return home. At this point, Karen realized her marriage was over. She no longer loved Craig, and it was only a matter of time before they divorced. These clandestine meetings persisted until December 2008. At the New Year's Eve celebration that year, the Kaler family went back to their hometown to reconnect with relatives and friends. Sonny was also in attendance at the gathering. Initially, Karen and Sonny kept a low profile, merely exchanging greetings. As the celebration continues and the alcohol slowly affects Karen and Sonny's behavior, they seem to have no regard for social norms. They became inseparable, openly showing affection by holding hands, sharing romantic glances, they even kissed. Craig's anger boiled over into fury after Karen publicly humiliated him by revealing her affair at a party attended by dozens of acquaintances. He lashed out at Karen and Sonny before dragging Karen away from the party. In his rage, Craig lost control and physically assaulted Karen, ripping her dress and slapping her, causing her to fall and hit her head. The incident marked the beginning of the end of their marriage. A few days later, Karen announced she was leaving Craig and initiated divorce proceedings, seeking custody of their children. Initially, Craig attempted to apologize and salvage their relationship for the sake of the children. But Karen was resolute. She said they should divorce, causing Craig to contact friends and family, begging them to convince Karen to reconsider. In the spring of 2009, Craig and Karen's marriage continued to deteriorate. Despite Craig's attempts to salvage their relationship, Karen made it clear she was leaving him for Sonny and she had never been truly happy in their marriage. The tension between them escalated into physical violence, with Craig grabbing Karen during an argument, leaving bruises on her arms. Karen reported the incident to the police, leading to Craig's arrest. After the incident, Karen took the children and moved out without waiting for the divorce to be finalized. Craig was devastated by her departure and even more so when he discovered that his daughters, Emily and Lauren, were siding with their mother. They told him that they had never seen their mother so happy, which Craig perceived as a betrayal. As a result, he cut off contact with his daughters, only spending time with his son Sean on weekends. Despite the ongoing divorce proceedings, Craig held on to the hope that Karen would change her mind and return to him. His desire to control her led him to engage in jealous behavior, including stalking her and attempting to install a hidden camera in her home. To pursue this, Craig sacrificed his work, initially taking vacation time, then claiming illness, and eventually skipping work altogether without explanation. This reckless behavior resulted in Craig's termination from his job. Without a steady income, he was forced to move in with his parents as he could no longer afford to live on his own. With ample free time, Craig began stalking Karen, prompting her to take him to court to obtain a restraining order. In November 2009, just before Thanksgiving, Karen took her children to visit their 89-year-old grandmother, Dorothy White, in Burlingame, Kansas. On the evening of November 29th, the Burlingame police received a distress call about a suspicious van and reports of gunshots. Dorothy's neighbors reported witnessing a small truck pull up to her house. A man exit the vehicle and enter the house. They claimed to have heard screams and gunshots, but were uncertain. The man then left the house, got back into the truck, and sped away. The neighbors did not attempt to apprehend him, fearing he was armed. When police arrived, they were met by 10-year-old Sean Kaler, who was frantically calling for help. Although Sean was unable to explain what had happened, it was clear that a horrific scene awaited the police. Inside the home, near the front door, Sonny was found lying in a pool of blood but surprisingly still alive despite having 2 gunshot wounds. In the kitchen, police discovered the lifeless body of 44-year-old Karen, who had been shot in the chest and then fatally shot at close range in the head. The body of her oldest daughter, 18-year-old Emily, was found between a wall and a couch. It appeared that Emily had attempted to hide from her enraged father but was caught and killed with 2 point-blank shots. Lauren, found in a pool of blood in the second-floor bedroom, was still alive but weakly called for help and repeatedly said that her father was the one who did it. Dorothy and Lauren were rushed to a nearby hospital's intensive care unit. Despite the doctor's efforts, Lauren died on December 1st due to massive blood loss and internal organ damage. Her great-grandmother passed away a few hours later. Sean, the only surviving witness, was in shock. Psychologists worked with him, but a thorough interrogation was necessary as he was the only living witness to the tragic events at his great-grandmother's house. Sean recounted that evening, stating that his mother was in the kitchen preparing dinner when he approached her to ask for his favorite pie. Suddenly, the back door swung open, and his father entered with a shotgun, pointing it at Karen without a word. He shot her, then moved closer and fired again. Sean was initially frozen in horror. His father then turned to Sean but didn't aim the gun. Instead, Craig stared at Sean silently and intently. Sean realized he had to escape. So he jumped out the open back door. He ran towards the main entrance, hoping to alert his grandmother, sisters, and call for help. However, upon reaching the threshold, he heard several more gunshots. Fearing what he might find inside, Sean hid in a small outbuilding. He heard more gunshots and waited in terror, afraid that his father would come after him. Craig Kaler was immediately added to the wanted list, with a warning that he was armed and extremely dangerous. As police received multiple reports of a speeding truck, they were able to quickly determine the direction the gunman was heading. At one point, Craig abandoned his vehicle in a wooded area and began walking down a deserted road. Law enforcement soon caught up with him and apprehended him the next morning. Upon arrest, police found the rifle and ammunition in the back seat of the abandoned vehicle, along with prescription medication for depression and anxiety disorders near the driver's seat. Craig did not resist arrest and appeared confused and frightened. He admitted to being armed with a gun and a hunting knife, but claimed he did not intend to use them. He also acknowledged that he had done something terrible, which he believed the police already knew about. At the police station, Craig fully confessed to his crimes and opened up to the investigating officer. He shared how his wife had cheated on him with someone named Sonny and how they had humiliated him in front of friends at a New Year's Eve party. He explained how his attempts to save his marriage had cost him his job and what was left of his self-respect. Craig became emotional, stating that he didn't know how he had decided to take such drastic action and felt that everyone, including his daughters, had betrayed him. Craig's trial started in December 2010. Craig, advised by his lawyer Thomas Heaney, retracted his initial confession. He claimed his actions were due to mental illness and insanity, which was his only defense to avoid the death penalty for the murder of 4 people. Heaney argued that Craig was in a fragile mental state following a series of personal setbacks. His wife had left him for someone else, his children sided with their mother, he lost his job, and had to move back in with his parents. According to Heaney, these factors led to a breakdown, and Craig committed the crime while insane, without realizing what he was doing. However, the prosecution found no evidence of insanity or an altered mental state in Craig's actions. They argued that his actions were calculated, as he had purchased guns and ammunition in advance and went to the victim's house knowing his family was there. He shot each victim twice, ensuring no chance of survival, but intentionally spared his son Sean, allowing him to escape. In August 2011, Craig was found guilty on all counts and received a death sentence. At the final hearing, 12-year-old Sean testified, stating that he didn't want his father to die, as he was his only remaining close relative. Despite multiple appeals by Craig and his lawyers, the verdict has remained unchanged. As of today, Craig is still in prison, fighting to have the case reviewed and the death sentence overturned. After the death of his mother and sisters, Sean moved in with his grandmother. Now Sean has grown up and he has completed his studies and chosen to stay and work in his hometown. Welcome back, detectives. Let's dive into another horrible case, the case of Brett Ryan. Brett Ryan grew up in Canada, in a large family with his parents, Bill and Susan. Bill works at the Toronto Star Daily newspaper and spends time on his many interests, including sports, yoga, and psychology, which help balance family life. In addition, his wife, Susan, is able to manage the household, take care of the children, and keep their Toronto home clean. Passers-by often stop to admire the family's beautiful and blooming garden. Although Susan loved her sons equally, but Brett seemed to be less criticized because he was generally well-behaved. Brett was very clever at getting out of difficult situations, which gave the impression that he was a good boy, although this was not always the case. Brett was extremely popular in school, with everyone wanting to be his friend or at least be able to greet him by name, just like his older brothers. After high school, Brett attended university, driven by a desire to surpass his brother's achievements. To earn extra money, he placed an ad in the local newspaper, offering to paint houses and fences for Toronto residents. At first, his business was quite successful and Brett felt proud, especially with his first income. His mother, Susan, was thrilled and often cited him as a role model for others. However, things took a turn when Brett dropped out of college to focus full-time on his paint business. Without a degree, he had to work full-time as a paint salesman, which deprived him of formal education and exposed him to paint fumes on a regular basis. For a while, Brett felt confident and superior to his brothers, but this soon changed. After a couple of years, his brothers, Christopher and Leland, graduated and landed jobs in their specialized fields. Christopher worked for the Toronto Transit Commission, and Leland became the family artist and designer. As they established their careers and moved out of their parents' home, Brett's power began to diminish significantly. To save money on rent, Brett continued to live with his parents and younger brother, who attended a school for gifted children. Brett's financial situation grew more dire over time. By 2007, when he turned 26, his debt had surged to more than $60,000. This burden led to depression, but despite his inner turmoil, Brett maintained a cheerful exterior, always willing to lend a helping hand and participate in volunteer work. His friends and acquaintances were unaware of the immense emotional pain he was hiding. Brett faced a severe situation on October 28, 2007. With winter approaching, he had no orders. Left with no other choice, Brett wore his oldest clothes, including a hat, a long sweater his brother had given him and a long scarf his mother had knitted. It was the first time he had worn the scarf, but it was finally coming in handy. He wrapped it around his face, leaving only a narrow slit for his eyes, and headed for the bank that was on the outskirts of his neighborhood. Brett stood in line at the bank, holding a thick folder and favoring his right foot as he waited his turn. When the bank employee called him forward, he approached her and spoke in a hushed tone. He calmly informed her that he had a gun and urged her to remove all the cash from the register and hand it over to him. He warned her that if she didn't comply, he would start shooting, and she would be the first person he would harm. She, with trembling hands, handed him all the cash from the register. Brett quietly exited the building, careful not to draw the attention of the guardians. Once outside, Brett took off running. He counted the money he had stolen from the bank, but it wasn't much, just over $1,000. To pay off his debt, he calculated that he would need to rob about 60 more banks, a crazy idea, but to him it seemed like the only option. For the first few days, Brett was fearful that the police would somehow catch up with him, so he avoided going home. He told his mother he had a job in a neighboring town and spent his nights sleeping in his car. Periodically, Brett would sneak back to his house to check if there were any police cars staking out the area. Finding none, he felt reassured that he was in the clear. The first robbery was followed by a second, then a third, and a fourth. Each time, Brett changed his clothes, opting for second-hand or discarded items he found in the trash. He would burn the used clothes after each crime. Brett also bought a beard from a costume party store to further disguise himself. Brett committed a string of bank robberies in the Toronto area, and his distinctive beard made a lasting impression on the witnesses. His total intended theft across all instances never exceeded $3,000. Brett's luck ran out when police spotted his car on surveillance cameras and followed him home. They tracked his exact route, gathering details from various vehicles to prove his guilt. Further inquiries yielded little new information, so the authorities closely tracked a particular road in an attempt to shed light on the case. Their patience and hard work finally paid off. They found a potential lead. This person of interest, a bearded man, was found walking alone near a bank and was promptly detained by the officer for further investigation. Brett was under investigation for 7 months before being charged with robbery with a firearm, despite having a gun permit. Notably, he never actually carried a gun or any other weapon during the robberies. He didn't even bring a kitchen knife. Initially, he was charged with 19 counts, but after multiple appeals filed by him and his family, only 8 of those counts were upheld. Upon being given the opportunity to apply for parole, Brett submitted a petition. In it, he asked the authorities to consider the circumstances that led him to commit the crimes, including severe depression caused by 2 failed relationships and a significant amount of debt. He also reiterated that he had never intended to harm anyone during the robberies, as evidenced by his lack of weapons. His remarks were taken into account, but as a condition of his potential parole, he was required to undergo a session with a psychologist. The sessions had a positive impact on Brett. During his time in prison, he had lost touch with his family, but he took the initiative to reconnect with them. The positive changes in Brett were noticed by the commissioners, and on November 24, 2010, he was released from prison. However, the freedom he had fought so hard for turned out to be more challenging than he had anticipated. Prior to his career as a painter, Brett struggled with deep emotional pain that weighed heavily on him. He had previously been a bank robber and served time in prison, which damaged his reputation. As a result, no company would hire him, and even those who initially hired him for house painting services would cancel once they discovered his true identity. The neighbors, who once admired Susan's garden and visited frequently, now spread unpleasant rumors about the family. The Brett family quickly sold their house and relocated to Scarborough. Susan started a new garden, and Brett found a job with a trading company. Although the pay was low, his parents helped him financially to rebuild his life and continue his university education. Brett continued to see a psychologist, who consistently advised him to maintain a strong connection with his family. Brett's life took a turn for the better when he met Kristen Baxter in September 2011. Kristen was an amazing person who had her own apartment with a stunning sea view. She was also into sports, which helped her stay in shape. What Brett appreciated most about her was that she didn't care about his past. They enjoyed traveling together, including a trip to Australia. Brett's parents were thrilled to see their son in a happy relationship and were confident that Kristen would encourage him to reach his full potential. However, just when everything was going well, tragedy struck. Brett's father passed away, leaving him in shock and sending him into a depressive state. As a result, Brett started visiting his psychologist more frequently to cope with his emotions. Brett was juggling two responsibilities: supporting his mother financially and nurturing his relationship with Kristen. They were both young adults, eager to build a stronger and more significant relationship with each other. Brett fell deeply in love with Kristen and decided to carry out an important plan. He had some savings and, after discussing his plans with his mother, decided to propose to Kristen with a ring. His mother supported his decision and gave him money to buy a ring. Although Kristen didn't need an expensive gift, Brett chose a gold ring with a large diamond to make the proposal special. Kristen happily accepted his proposal. As they began planning their wedding, Brett agreed with Kristen's decisions, but he was worried about the high costs and how they would affect his job. Brett found a job opening at a large technology company on the internet and applied for it. He updated his resume and submitted it, and was even invited for an interview, which he successfully passed. As a result, he was offered the job and was thrilled. He eagerly shared the news with his fiancée and mother, and asked them for money to buy an expensive suit for work. His mother agreed to help him, and he purchased the suit. However, just as Brett was about to start his new job, the company called him to inform him that they had to withdraw their offer. The security department had discovered his past criminal record, and the company could no longer hire him. This news was devastating for Brett, and his mood plummeted. He felt like giving up on his job search and education, wondering why he was wasting his time applying for jobs that he would never get due to his past mistakes. He decided that it would be better to use the money his mother and brothers had given him for something else. Brett had dropped out of university, but he didn't tell his family or his counselor. To maintain the illusion of success, Brett would wear a suit and tie, then change into casual clothes on the way to his job as a house painter. He would tell his relatives that he worked in an office. To further deceive his loved ones, Brett would post fake photos on social media, pretending to be at work or attending business events. He would also fake phone calls, making it seem like he was busy with work-related issues. Brett's family had no idea that he was hiding the truth about his life. As Brett's wedding to Kristen approached in September 2016, his deception reached new heights. He rented an expensive restaurant for the reception, which cost $100 per guest. His family was thrilled, believing that Brett had finally turned his life around with a prestigious job and a beautiful fiancée. However, Brett's deceptions became so overwhelming that he could no longer control his lies. Brett's wedding was just a month away, and he was struggling to cover the costs. He had been borrowing money from his mother, but when she could no longer help him, he pressured her to find a higher-paying job. Meanwhile, he was planning a bachelor party and had invited all his friends and brothers. Brett had a secret. He had been lying to his family for a year about working as an engineer for a technology company. When he finally confessed to his counselor, the counselor advised him to come clean to his mother. After much procrastination, Brett told his mother the truth, which devastated her. She bragged to everyone about her son's success. Brett's mother demanded that he tell his fiancée, Kristen, the truth, threatening to do so herself if he didn't. She also warned him that his brothers were aware of the situation and were on her side. However, Brett couldn't bring himself to confess to Kristen, despite knowing that the wedding was unlikely to happen due to his deception. With less than a month to go before the wedding, Brett remained silent, knowing that Kristen deserved to know the truth before it was too late. Brett was anxious about his mother revealing a potentially scandalous secret to his fiancée, Kristen. Every time her phone rang, he would tense up, holding his breath until he realized it wasn't his mother on the line, but rather one of Kristen's friends inquiring about her wedding plans. Eventually, Brett came up with a plan to silence his mother for good. As a convicted felon, Brett was prohibited from owning firearms. He decided to use a crossbow, a silent and deadly weapon, to carry out his plan. Interestingly, his late father had taught him how to shoot a crossbow at targets in their garden, a hobby that Brett had excelled at. Brett purchased the crossbow and arrows at a local sporting goods store and hid them in his garage, disguising them among construction debris. He also created a fake alibi by rigging his computer to automatically post pre-written comments on YouTube. He achieved this by attaching a spoon to a fan, which was connected to his computer. The fan was set to a timer, making it seem like Brett was actively using his computer at the time of the crime. Brett made everyone believe that he spent the whole day at home, watching videos and commenting on them. However, on the morning of August 25th, he had other plans. He put on disguising clothes that concealed his face, sneaked out of the house through the back door to avoid the security cameras, and took a train to his parents' house. He wants to eliminate anyone who might stand in the way of the peaceful life he and Kristen are building. When Brett arrived at his parents' house, his mother, Susan, was taken aback by his unexpected visit. She wasn't feeling well that day, but Brett persisted in persuading her not to reveal his plans to his future wife. Despite her poor health, Susan firmly refused to comply with Brett's demands. As he continued to pressure her, Brett's anger escalated, and Susan sensed that something was terribly wrong. She noticed the crazed look in her son's eyes and warned him that she had already called for help and that Christopher was on his way. Brett's anger reached a boiling point. He rushed to the garage, grabbed a crossbow, but his rage and adrenaline surge made him unable to aim properly. Instead, he used the crossbow's butt to bludgeon his mother. To ensure she was dead, he tightened a rope around her neck. After covering her body with plastic bags, Brett loaded the crossbow with arrows, ready to face whoever was coming next. Brett's brother Christopher was lured into a trap by the suspect. As he entered the garage or the yard, Brett, who was hiding in the bushes, ambushed and shot Christopher in the neck. Christopher died shortly after the attack. Alexander, the youngest brother, was the next target. The suspect had also managed to lure him, but Alexander's outcome was different. Shot in the neck with an arrow, Alexander was critically injured but didn't die instantly. He screamed and cried for help as the attack took place. Throughout this violence, Leland remained asleep on the second floor, oblivious to the crime happening nearby and to the identity of the perpetrator, who was also a family member. It was Alexander's screams that startled Leland out of sleep, ran downstairs, and stumbled upon the horrific scene of his brother Brett trying to strangle Alexander. A fight broke out between Leland and Brett, and Leland ended up in control, forcing Brett to back down. Leland immediately fled to a neighbor's house and called the police. With no means of escape, Brett remained in the house, realizing too late that his actions had disastrous consequences. In a desperate attempt to make amends, he composed a text message to Kristen, pleading for her forgiveness. Upon arriving at the scene, police officers found Brett, covered in blood, sitting beside his critically injured brother Alexander, who would later succumb to his injuries in the hospital. Brett voluntarily surrendered to the authorities, requesting to be handcuffed and taken into custody. During his confession, he revealed the location of his mother's body, hidden beneath packages in the garage, and acknowledged that she was beyond help. Brett admitted at the police station during the trial that he had not intended to kill Susan, but rather to scare her. In contrast, he had planned to kill Christopher and Alexander, who were witnesses to the crime. If they had not been present, they would still be alive. Brett attempted to justify his actions by citing his struggles with depression, but this did not lead to a more lenient sentence. Despite Brett's cooperation with the investigation and his voluntary confession, the judge imposed 3 life sentences, 1 for each murder. Brett will be eligible for parole in 2041. Leland, the sole survivor of the incident, has refused to speak to reporters, but he is well known in Toronto as the one who narrowly escaped the carnage. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Lindsay Wilson. Lindsay Wilson was a kind and loving young woman. Lindsay had a deep-seated need for connection and love. Her major misstep was that she misjudged her partner and invested herself in their toxic relationship. Lindsay was 17 when she found out she was pregnant. Growing up in a loving and supportive family, she had never expected to become a mother so young. Although she was emotionally mature, what made it even more difficult was that her boyfriend, whom she had been dating since she was 13, abandoned her as soon as he learned he was going to be a father. His sudden departure left Lindsay feeling both upset and scared. Lindsay was all too familiar with the physical and financial strains of motherhood. Her family, the Wilsons, were loving and close-knit, but they had often struggled to make ends meet. Despite their financial challenges, Lindsay's parents had always worked hard to provide for their children. When Lindsay met Mitchell, 5 months into her pregnancy, she felt like she had been given a rare gift. Mitchell, who was 20 years old at the time, was attentive, caring, and gentle. What impressed Lindsay most was that her pregnancy didn't deter him. Instead, he was eager to be involved and supportive. Mitchell told Lindsay that he had fallen in love with her at first sight and wanted to spend the rest of his life with her, raising her child as his own. To show his commitment, Mitchell began working overtime to ensure that Lindsay and their unborn child would not have to worry about anything. 20-year-old Mitchell was a true gentleman. He was attentive and loving to Lindsay, despite her delicate condition. In fact, Mitchell had fallen deeply in love with her at first sight and wanted to spend his life with her, including raising her child as his own. At the time, Mitchell was earning a good income. However, when they announced their decision to get married, their parents were shocked. They felt that their 5-week relationship was too short to withstand the challenges and circumstances that came with marriage. Despite their concerns, Lindsay relatives noticed a positive change in her since being with Mitchell. She had regained her cheerfulness and good health. However, some of them found Mitchell's behavior to be a bit insincere. Nevertheless, no one interfered with their decision to get married, and instead chose to keep their doubts to themselves. The wedding took place in August 1995, surrounded by a small, intimate group of family and friends, mostly from the bride's side. The groom's side was noticeably underrepresented, with only his parents, a brother, and 2 friends in attendance. Despite the celebratory atmosphere, Lindsay relatives couldn't shake off their uneasy feelings about the union. However, Lindsay herself was over the moon, believing she had found her perfect match. As the evening wore on, their happiness was short-lived. A disagreement erupted, and the newlyweds' argument played out in front of their guests. The reason for Mitchell's outburst seemed trivial, and his reaction was disproportionately intense. The situation escalated, with Mitchell grasping Lindsay's hand and violently shaking her, leaving everyone in attendance stunned and uncomfortable. Mitchell appeared agitated and threatening, causing concern. When he calmed down, he apologized to everyone and made light of the situation, attributing his behavior to holiday stress. Although Lindsay didn't think much of the incident at the time and soon forgot about it, it was actually one of the warning signs of their toxic relationship. After getting married, Mitchell and Lindsay moved into an apartment in Southport, away from their parents. They started their life together and soon welcomed a baby girl named Robin. However, Lindsay soon discovered that her husband had a volatile temper, which cast a shadow over the joy of their new family. Mitchell's moods were unpredictable. One moment he was happy and joking, and the next, he would become aggressive and unreasonable. She thought she was maintaining a delicate balance at home, but in reality, she was giving in to his control. He dictates her every move and gets angry if she misses a phone call or doesn't pick up. Their arguments often ended with Mitchell begging for forgiveness and declaring his love. For a while, it seemed that peace had been restored, but their cycle of arguments became more and more intense. Lindsay struggled to recognize who she once loved. She frequently shared her concerns with her relatives, who urged her to leave the relationship and end her suffering. However, Lindsay found it difficult to acknowledge her mistake and admit defeat. Lindsay's relatives noticed that she often dwelled on memories of the past. Whenever her husband promised to change and return to his gentle and caring ways, Lindsay wanted to believe him and waited for him to fulfill his promises. Meanwhile, Mitchell's controlling behavior intensified. He restricted Lindsay's freedom, forbidding her from going out alone in the evenings and eventually requiring her to be accompanied by him at all times. Despite his possessiveness, Mitchell was seen with other women, sparking Lindsay's suspicions of infidelity. Lindsay confided in her older sister about her concerns, sharing an incident where a woman visited their home, unaware that Mitchell was married. This revelation led to another argument, which escalated into physical violence. Physical abuse gradually became a part of Lindsay's life. To control her and protect his reputation, Mitchell started limiting her interactions with others. He began by restricting her contact with neighbors, friends, and acquaintances, and eventually with her family. Lindsay, unhappy and fearful of being caught and punished, tried to secretly maintain contact with her loved ones. Despite the problems in their relationship, Lindsay stayed with Mitchell. One reason was the comfortable life he provided. He had a good income, supported her and their child, and paid the bills, leaving her without any financial worries. Lindsay's life changed dramatically when she found herself pregnant again. Although her husband, Mitchell, was a good father to her daughter from a previous relationship, she felt that having another child would be unwise in their current circumstances. She decided to have an abortion. When Mitchell found out about her decision, he became furious and verbally and physically abused her. Lindsay packed her belongings and took her daughter to her parents' home. Her family was relieved to see her. At first, Lindsay was happy to be apart from her husband, Mitchell. But over time, she started to miss him. Mitchell, eager to win her back, would call her constantly, begging her to return. Despite initial reservations, Lindsay was eventually won over by Mitchell's claims that he had changed. Everything seems to be back to normal, they are even looking forward to another child. However, their happiness was short-lived. After 6 months, Mitchell's violent temper flared up again. Although he didn't harm Lindsay, who was pregnant at the time, he unleashed his fury on their apartment. He smashed furniture, ripped doors off their hinges, and damaged the walls. He even threw their television out the window and vandalized their car. The landlord, fed up with the destruction, demanded that they pay for the damages and move out. The family's financial situation became even more dire. As a result, they was forced to take out a significant loan and downsize to a smaller, more modest apartment. In October 1997, Lindsay gave birth to their son, Jack. Mitchell was overjoyed at the arrival of his child. However, the relationship between the spouses continued to deteriorate over time. Mitchell often left home for extended periods, sometimes for just a few days, sometimes for an entire week, frequently citing trivial or made-up reasons. Although Lindsay had grown accustomed to her husband's behavior, she eventually reached her breaking point and filed for divorce, returning to her parents' home when Mitchell abandoned her once again. Lindsay realized she couldn't handle the separation from Mitchell on her own, so she reached out to a local charity that supports women in crisis. The charity helped her find affordable housing in a different city, allowing her to start fresh. However, she was worried that Mitchell would find out her new contact information, so she took steps to protect herself. When Mitchell began making threats, she took it a step further and got a restraining order from the police. With the help of a therapist, Lindsay started rebuilding her life. She kept a journal to document her experiences, intending to use it as a warning for her children in the future, so they wouldn't make the same mistakes she did. The journal entries supported what her relatives had said about the problems within the family. Unfortunately, despite her efforts to stay hidden, Mitchell eventually discovered her phone number and began calling her constantly, demanding to see their son. Lindsay, now free, soon felt lonely and couldn't resist her ex's persistence. They started talking and seeing each other again, eventually moving back in together. Ashamed of her weakness, Lindsay kept this a secret, but it eventually came out. Her relatives and friends were shocked and disappointed by her reunion with he they considered a tyrant, and they couldn't understand why she had taken him back. Her relatives continued to dislike Mitchell and cut off most communication with him. Despite their efforts to help her, Lindsay repeatedly returned to the abusive relationship. As a result, her loved ones eventually gave up trying to save her, accepting the situation and distancing themselves. This time, however, Lindsay's decision would prove to have devastating consequences. After Lindsay disclosed her situation, a social worker began monitoring the young family. However, the social worker reported that she had been unable to contact Lindsay for several weeks. Every time she visited the home, Lindsay's husband, Mitchell, would answer the door, and he was also the first to answer any phone calls. Despite the social worker's repeated requests to speak directly with Lindsay, Mitchell would make excuses and prevent her from doing so. The social worker would leave her contact information, but Lindsay never returned her calls. The social worker became concerned for Lindsay's safety and requested a welfare check. When law enforcement responded to the report and visited the address, they too were unable to speak with Lindsay. Mitchell claimed that he had not seen his wife at home for a long time, but he did not consider her missing. Mitchell said that Lindsay participated in a party with a friend on Christmas Eve, returning home early in the morning somewhat intoxicated. This led to an argument with Mitchell. Following the argument, Lindsay packed her belongings and left without saying goodbye to the children. Mitchell claimed Lindsay had left him for another man and no longer wanted to have any contact with him. Mitchell's subsequent media appearances sparked widespread attention. He presented himself as a worried and abandoned husband, pleading for Lindsay to return. However, during these interviews, he also shared intimate details about their marriage, occasionally speaking negatively about his wife. Mitchell believes that Lindsay's actions stemmed from a desire for a lavish lifestyle. He said to have seen her driving an expensive car, which he thought was proof that she had left their children for a wealthy man. Despite her public image, Mitchell was enjoying the freedom of a single life. The search for Lindsay began with conversations with her relatives. During these conversations, it was learned that she was last seen by her family on December 11th. At that time, she appeared to be in high spirits and looking well, with her behavior being normal. During their investigation, detectives were surprised that no one had expressed concern about the young wife's whereabouts for 2 months. However, they soon discovered a plausible explanation. Mitchell had a history of limiting his wife's interactions with others, even close relatives. In the past, her family had difficulty staying in touch with her due to Mitchell's controlling behavior, which made it more believable that Lindsay had intentionally kept a low profile for an extended period. The news of Lindsay's disappearance alarmed everyone, despite the initial assumption that she was not the type to be concerned about. She was known for her modest lifestyle and never drank. Additionally, her husband had restricted her from having any contact with the outside world, including friends and acquaintances. Several inconsistencies in Mitchell's statement to the police raised suspicions about his character. It seemed unlikely that Mitchell would willingly let his wife leave, and that Lindsay would not abandon her children to a controlling husband. To clarify the situation, the police conducted a thorough investigation, interviewing all of Lindsay's acquaintances and searching for anyone who may have seen her after the family gathering. They also questioned their neighbors and obtained surveillance footage from the residential complex and surrounding areas. Lindsay's disappearance was not immediately noticed, and by the time it was. However, investigators later discovered that she was last seen in person on December 15 at the local post office, where she sent several letters and postcards. Her older sister confirmed that they met that day, despite Mitchell's disapproval. During their brief conversation over tea, Lindsay handed her sister a note and asked her to read it later. Unfortunately, the sister forgot about the note in her purse and was unable to find it later, leaving its contents a mystery. As the months passed, investigators grew increasingly suspicious that she was no longer alive, given her prolonged absence and lack of contact. Although they couldn't charge Mitchell without sufficient evidence, their suspicions about him intensified as they learned more about their history and relationship. Lindsay's parents and detectives suspected Mitchell was involved in her disappearance, but lacked concrete evidence. Searches at their home and nearby turned up nothing. In a televised interview, Mitchell denied any wrongdoing, even claiming Lindsay's family would eventually apologize for suspecting him. Just before the holidays, Mitchell sent a postcard in hair dye to the lead investigator. The postcard's sarcastic message mocked the detective, implying he needed confidence and to cover his gray hair. This gesture showcased Mitchell's arrogance, despite portraying himself as a victim in the media. The investigation team held an interview to clarify some aspects of the case, but they didn't reveal all the details. They suggested that Mitchell Key, a well-known family man, was not what he seemed to be. In 2000, Mitchell Key found himself at the center of a scandal when it was discovered that he had been forging his wife's signature to claim social benefits. Although this revelation indirectly supported the theory that he was involved in Lindsay's disappearance, the investigators had trouble making progress due to Mitchell's popularity. Many people defended him, arguing that as a single father, he needed financial assistance. Despite this, the detectives were able to charge him with fraud. Mitchell was found guilty and sentenced to a month of community service. Mitchell's situation took a turn for the worse. The forged signature of his missing wife raised more than a few eyebrows, and the public's outrage grew. As the criticism mounted, Mitchell's composure began to fray, and he lashed out at the media for invading his personal life. In a groundbreaking development, a visitor to an amusement park on June 1, 2000, stumbled upon a disturbing discovery that rekindled the Lindsay disappearance case. Their dog's strange behavior near the roller coaster led to the discovery of human remains. Forensic analysis confirmed the remains belonged to Lindsay, revealing she had been the victim of a violent crime. This breakthrough shifted the investigation's focus to finding the person responsible. On June 7, Mitchell was questioned by detectives for over 36 hours, during which time he eventually cracked under the pressure and confessed to murdering and dismembering his wife. According to his testimony, Lindsay had asked for a divorce on December 15, 1998, after meeting with her sister. This request enraged Mitchell, causing him to attack and strangle her in front of their children. He then hid her body in their bedroom, taking steps to conceal the smell. Realizing he needed help to dispose of the body, Mitchell turned to his brother Elliot, a butcher, for assistance. Although Elliot was initially hesitant, Mitchell eventually convinced him to help. While their children played in the next room, the brothers dismembered Lindsay's body and later scattered her remains throughout the city. The murderer showed no remorse or empathy during his confession. Instead, he seemed to take pride in his actions, saying that without his confession, they would never have been able to prove his guilt. He then led the authorities to the locations where he had hidden the victim's body parts. Unfortunately, her head and one hand were never found. The forensic examination confirmed that all of those of Lindsay, leaving no doubt about Mitchell's guilt. The trial of the Mitchell brothers took place in January 2001 and was a relatively straightforward process. Mitchell was found guilty of first-degree murder and received a life sentence with the possibility of parole after 17 years. A court-appointed psychiatrist observed that Mitchell displayed classic characteristics of a narcissist with sadistic tendencies. Elliot, Mitchell's brother, was sentenced to 7 years in prison for his role in covering up the crime. Lindsay's children were taken care of by her grandparents, who gave them their last name. 3 months after the sentence, the Wilson family faced another tragedy when one of Lindsay's older brothers, unable to cope with the loss, took his own life in the family's attic. In his goodbye note, he expressed his desire to reunite with Lindsay, saying he saw no point in living in a world he considered cruel. As of 2017, Mitchell Key, Lindsay's murderer, became eligible for parole, but as of January 2023, his parole requests have been denied 3 times. Hello friends, welcome to our channel. Today we're going to take a look at another horrible case with you. The case of Mary Catherine Higdon. Mary Catherine Higdon, born in 1994, was a lively child who spread joy wherever she went. Her infectious laughter and humor brought delight to those around her, often with her quick wit and impressive impersonations. She loved taking leisurely strolls around town with her pet frog perched on a shoestring, proudly showing it off to everyone. From a young age, Mary had a deep appreciation for nature and animals, spending hours exploring the outdoors and marveling at the beauty of the natural world. Aside from being an entertainment enthusiast, Mary had a passion for performing. She would often stage plays for her family, captivating them with her creativity and boundless imagination. As she grew older, Mary was introduced to firearms and developed a strong interest in them. She learned the importance of handling guns responsibly, respecting their power and potential. Over time, her skills improved and she became an accomplished marksman with a growing passion for guns. Mary Catherine met her soulmate, Stephen Freeman, in high school. Born on January 1, 1995, in Griffin, Georgia, Stephen grew up in a close-knit family with his parents and brother. He was a happy child with many friends who described him as laid-back, kind, and helpful. Stephen's family was very important to him, especially his mother, with whom he shared a special bond. He loved spending time outdoors, enjoying activities like hiking, camping, fishing, and hunting. Mary Catherine and Stephen quickly formed a strong connection in high school, united by their shared passion for the outdoors. Their love for nature brought them together, and their relationship flourished as they explored the great outdoors, whether hiking, camping, fishing, or hunting. This connection served as the foundation of their deep and enduring relationship. Mary Catherine and Stephen's high school graduation marked the start of a new era in their lives as a couple. They decided to take their relationship to the next level by moving in together in a house in Griffin, Georgia. The couple was ecstatic about having their own space and starting a new life. Mary Catherine had become an integral part of Stephen's family, with his mother treating her like a daughter. She welcomed Mary Catherine into their family with open arms, and the couple felt grateful for her love and support. Every Sunday, Mary Catherine and Stephen would visit Stephen's parents for a big family dinner. This weekly tradition brought the family closer together and solidified Mary Catherine's place within it. Over time, Stephen's friends also grew to appreciate Mary Catherine. Initially, they had reservations about the couple's relationship, but as they spent more time together, they realized how well-suited the pair were. They admired how Mary Catherine brought happiness and joy into Stephen's life and shared his passion for the outdoors. Stephen, a metal worker, repaired roofs, his wife Mary Catherine had two jobs: part-time teacher's assistant and sales at a sporting goods store, where she learned gun safety from coworker Thomas Skinner. This complemented Stephen's passion for firearms as an avid hunter and target shooter with multiple guns, including a Glock 42 at home for protection. By summer 2018, Mary Catherine and Stephen had been in a 5-year relationship in Griffin, Georgia. Tragically, it came to an end on August 1st. That day, Mary Catherine made a frantic 911 call, screaming that she had accidentally shot Stephen. When police arrived at their apartment, they found Mary Catherine in a state of distress, crying and hyperventilating over Stephen's motionless body. Despite his still being alive with a chest wound, Mary Catherine was screaming that she couldn't lose him. An ambulance rushed Stephen to the hospital, where doctors made efforts to save his life. But unfortunately, he eventually succumbed to his injuries. Mary Catherine visited the police station to explain the shooting incident. She claimed that she had accidentally shot Stephen while handing him a gun, which he normally kept beside his bed for protection. However, the police officers detected the smell of alcohol on her breath and noticed discrepancies in her account, which shifted from handing the gun to tossing it. The police were skeptical, knowing that a tossed gun would not fire on its own, and the nature of the wound suggested that Mary Catherine had deliberately pointed the gun at Stephen. During the interview, Mary Catherine eventually confessed that she had acted out of anger. Although the police had recorded the interview, there was only feedback during the crucial moment when she admitted to shooting Stephen out of anger. Nevertheless, despite the missing recording, the police were convinced that they had collected sufficient forensic evidence to prove that Mary Catherine had intentionally shot her boyfriend Stephen. At the apartment of Mary Catherine and Stephen, police found evidence of a heated argument before Stephen was shot. Scattered food suggested a prior altercation. This was the 6th time police had been called to the residence in the past year due to domestic disturbances. Despite Mary Catherine's claims, the gun used in the shooting was found to have been loaded that night. Traces of grease on the gun and magazine led the police to conclude that Mary Catherine, who was cooking dinner at the time, had loaded the weapon after shooting Stephen. Stephen's friends told police their relationship was marked by frequent arguments, possessiveness, and verbal abuse from Mary Catherine. Friends saw her as mentally unstable, causing tension. When Stephen tried to distance himself, she'd bombard him with texts and calls, forcing him to block her. One friend revealed Mary Catherine pulled a gun on Stephen multiple times, but he didn't report it, fearing trouble for her. Stephen's friends were stunned when they learned that Mary Catherine had accidentally shot him, especially since they knew she was familiar with firearms. However, what they were unaware of was that 3 months earlier, Stephen had confided in a friend that Mary Catherine had a disturbing episode where she ran around outside, screaming at the top of her lungs, and even attempted to shoot both him and herself. Furthermore, just a month before the incident, Stephen had shared with another friend that although Mary Catherine had previously threatened him with a gun, this time her eyes had a look that genuinely terrified him, making him believe she might actually carry out her threat. Stephen's friends told police he'd been tired of Mary Catherine's behavior and planned to leave her after 7 years. He intended to move away without telling her, fearing her reaction. On July 30th, 2018, Stephen sent Mary Catherine a friendly text, but the next night, he ignored her calls and texts after a fight. Mary Catherine was cooking dinner when she noticed Stephen was missing. She called his mom, who said he was with a friend. Enraged, Mary Catherine drove to the friend's house to confront him. When she arrived, she saw Stephen in the truck and began yelling at him. He tried to calm her down, saying he was heading home. Stephen's friend said Mary Catherine pulled a gun on him multiple times, but she denied it. She admitted threatening suicide with a gun, though. His mom believed Mary Catherine's threats kept Stephen from leaving, fearing she'd harm herself if he did. Mary Catherine said Stephen escalated the situation, becoming violent, throwing dinner in her face. She claimed self-defense, grabbing a gun to scare him off, but he lunged at her, and as she backed away, she saw he was bleeding from the chest. At the time of the shooting, Mary Catherine didn't share her account of events with the police because she was too embarrassed to reveal that Stephen had a history of violence towards her, including hitting her in the past and being controlling. In fact, she claimed that on one occasion, he kicked her out of bed so forcefully that her head hit the door frame. However, Stephen's friends described their relationship differently, saying they had seen Mary Catherine hit Stephen, including an incident where she slapped him hard in the face. By contrast, Mary Catherine's sister offered a different view, stating that 2 weeks before the shooting, she had seen bruises on Mary Catherine's arm. Mary Catherine's sister said Mary Catherine confided in her about Stephen's physical attack. The police investigation found Stephen's death was a murder. Mary Catherine was arrested and charged with murder and other crimes. She refused a plea deal and chose to go to trial, claiming she shot Stephen in self-defense to protect herself from his aggression. A year after Stephen's death, Mary Catherine's trial began, revealing the tumultuous nature of their relationship. Her defense team argued that she acted in self-defense, citing Stephen's history of aggressive and abusive behavior as justification for her actions. To support their claim, they presented evidence to the jury that demonstrated Stephen's controlling, manipulative, and dangerous nature, which had led Mary Catherine to fear for her safety. Mary Catherine testified tearfully about years of abuse by Stephen, recounting a disturbing pattern of physical, mental, emotional, verbal, and sexual mistreatment. She described his attacks, belittling, and disregard for her humanity, saying his abuse knew no bounds, leaving her trapped and terrified. Mary Catherine's defense presented a text from Stephen, saying he'd punish her when he got home. Mary Catherine testified that meant physical abuse, and if she defended herself, he'd hit her harder. Another text shown in court read, "Don't hit me, or I'll hit you back 2 times harder." Mary Catherine testified that Stephen had a red room, like in 50 Shades of Grey, where they had aggressive and violent sex. She provided a text from Stephen saying, "You're going to the red room," to back her claim. Mary Catherine also alleged Stephen assaulted her twice, once after a Disney World trip, saying she felt uncomfortable with their increasingly aggressive sex and asked him to stop. But he intensified his efforts, claiming she owed him for gifts. The defense presented text messages from Stephen to support Mary Catherine's abuse claims. These messages were vulgar, threatening, and showed a pattern of verbal assaults. Over 60 pages of messages showcased Stephen's abuse, including one disturbing message where he held a dead fish, captioned, "This is you." Another message presented to the court was one from Stephen after Mary Catherine cheated on him, in which he wrote that he was going to wreck her for wrecking him. Furthermore, the defense alleged that Stephen had a drug and alcohol addiction that contributed to his violent outbursts. Mary Catherine said she broke up with Stephen, not the other way around. She claimed he got angry and threatened her, so she grabbed a gun in self-defense. Her last words to him before firing were, "Get out of my house." Stephen's friends and family disputed Mary Catherine's claims that he was violent and abusive, knowing him as friendly and caring. His mom denied knowledge of disturbing texts and threats, but claimed he only said hurtful things out of anger. Mary Catherine was questioned about not reporting Stephen's alleged abuse. The state also pointed out she searched for violent, explicit images online hours before the shooting, claiming she did it to please Stephen. The state argued she'd changed her story about the shooting at least 10 times since her initial interview. Evidence in court included a text from Stephen to Mary Catherine, saying she'd previously pointed a gun at him, and his friends testified about witnessing her abuse towards him, supporting the state's claim that she was violent towards him, not the other way around. Jurors deliberated for 4 hours before acquitting Mary Catherine of malice murder, felony murder, and lesser charges. Shocked family and friends expected a guilty verdict, but jurors later revealed they believed Mary Catherine intentionally killed Stephen. However, they couldn't prove it beyond a reasonable doubt due to lack of evidence, making it hard to distinguish murder from self-defense.